In 2012, 16-year-old Alex Skeel started dating Jordan Worth, outwardly a bright, bubbly 16-year-old who had aspirations of being a teacher. However, this relationship would almost cost Alex his life. Jordan Worth is a very dangerous young woman who subjected Alex to a campaign of abuse over almost 5 years. She controlled every aspect of his life, banned him from seeing his friends and took him to his family, took control of his money, forced him to quit his job, instead go to classes with her at university, even though he wasn't studying there. Between 2016 and 2017, the abuse escalated significantly. Jordan burnt, starved, and stabbed Alex, with him being forced to bind his wounds with cling film and football socks. Her abuse turned a happy teenager into a shell of a man. It was only with the help of a persistent police officer and Alex's own bravery the abuse came to an end in June 2017, and he was able to get proper medical treatment, with doctors saying that he was 10 days away from death. When confronted with her behaviour, Jordan showed no remorse for her actions and was completely disconnected from reality. Here was her talking about attacking Alex with a knife.
Tell me about the knife.
Oh, it was a big one from the kitchen. I think it was a bread knife, I'm not actually sure.
So how far do you think the knife went in, Jordan?
I don't think it went that far, but it did. There was a lot of blood.
Jordan Worth was the first woman in the UK to be convicted of coercive and controlling behaviour in a relationship. But the lenient sentence she got, her remorselessness, and the horror that she put Alex through is truly sickening. Welcome to Evil Among Us.
I need to start by saying something, which I did on a previous occasion. This is an important video raising awareness about male victims of domestic abuse. I'm passionate about giving people like this a voice. To be abused by someone who claims to love you is the ultimate betrayal. However, people still say things like, why didn't they just leave?
Domestic abuse is often relentless, master manipulators, and frequently dangerous. Sometimes leaving costs people their lives. I'm concerned that as I'm talking about a male, people might make comments about him not being a real man or something. Honestly, that's part of the problem. Men who are victims to this type of abuse rarely report it because they're worried about being judged. Alex Skeel, the victim in this case, has had the courage to tell his story. He should be commended, not condemned. Like any survivor of domestic abuse, male or female, they should have our support and respect. So, if you're thinking of posting something that in any way blames the victims of domestic abuse or disrespects them, then just don't. I don't think that's too much to ask. So, Alexander Skeel was born on the 17th of August 1995 in Luton, in the county of Bedfordshire in the UK. He didn't have the easiest start in life. One of twins, he and his brother Luke were born prematurely and weighed just 2 pounds when they entered the world. They spent weeks in intensive care and underwent multiple operations. The boys thankfully pulled through, much to the relief of their parents. The twins had been, throughout their lives, especially close to their mother, Geraldine. The family lived in the village of Stewartby, south of the town of Bedford. Alex was a happy and caring child. He was also football mad and had aspirations about becoming a professional footballer. He was interested in girls, but had never dated before. And this all changed in 2012, when he met 16-year-old Jordan Worth at Bedford College. I usually use the last name of the perpetrators in my videos, but it flows better if I use the first name in this case, so that's what I'm going to do. Very little has been publicly reported about Jordan Worth's background. She was born in April 1995, but the details of her parents, or whether she had any siblings, haven't been published. It's reported that she grew up in the small village of Ridgemont in Bedfordshire and came from, quote, a loving and supportive family. However, as I'll go into later, I find this almost impossible to believe, considering the things she did. Jordan was a high achiever in school and was a trained gymnast. She was also an animal lover and volunteered to help abandoned animals and was even involved in charity work to raise money for children in Africa. She had aspirations about becoming a teacher, and so, outwardly, everything seems to suggest that Jordan Worth was a caring and kind young lady who appeared to want to spend the rest of her life caring for others. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is the impression she gave to both Alex and his friends when they met. She was attentive, warm, and hung on Alex's every word. The pair began dating. They looked like any other teenage couple, but Jordan was hiding who she really was. An insecure, mentally unstable abuser with a pathological need to control her partners, and she had no hesitation using manipulation, threats, and eventually serious violence to get what she wanted. She began to display this behaviour soon after the pair got together. Jordan's control of Alex started subtly, with her commenting that she didn't like the clothes or shoes that he wore, or how he styled his hair. Alex was eager to impress Jordan, so he went along with what she said. These comments clearly don't always mean a partner is abusive. They could potentially come from a place of caring, with someone telling their partner how they could dress in order to boost how they feel about themselves. However, this was not the case with Jordan. She was getting Alex used to following her instructions, chipping away his perception of himself. Quickly, Jordan's behaviour became more bizarre and concerning. In April 2013, Jordan turned 18, and as a treat, Alex's parents treated her to an overnight trip to London, where they had tickets to see The Lion King. However, all of a sudden, Jordan disappeared. Alex and his parents were frantically searching for her, calling her on her mobile phone, but she wouldn't answer. After an hour, they found Jordan sat in the lobby of the hotel they were staying at, laughing her head off. Alex and his family found her behaving very odd, and it was only years later that he realised what she was doing. Jordan was emotionally manipulating him, getting Alex to worry about her, trying to force a deeper bond between them, but also instilling in him the fear that she could potentially just disappear. It's far easier to control someone if they're constantly on the back foot, if you make them unsure of what's going on, if they don't know whether they're coming or going. Jordan quickly began showing irrational jealousy, with her appearing to have an issue with Alex speaking to or even being anywhere near other girls. This led to her ruining his 18th birthday party in August 2013. At the party, there were 100 guests, and everyone was having a good time, when all of a sudden, Jordan began literally screaming in the face of a 15-year-old family friend, accusing her of trying to take Alex away from her. Her behaviour was so loud and unexpected that the party came to a halt, and everyone just stared at what was going on. It was at this point that Alex's friends took him to one side and said there was something seriously wrong. People shouldn't act that way, and they told him that he should end the relationship now. However, Alex had fallen in love with Jordan. She was his first relationship. He, like a lot of people, made excuses for her behaviour, but also, as he'd never had a girlfriend before, he didn't realise that this was not how people should act. However, this was just the beginning. Jordan would repeatedly accuse Alex of cheating on her, without any evidence, and, despite him trying to reassure her, she would repeat these accusations again and again and again. She convinced herself that Alex was texting other girls, and on one occasion, snatched his phone, took out the SIM card and snapped it in half. This was enough for Alex, and he broke up with Jordan at the end of August 2013. But 2 days later, there was a knock on Alex's door. Jordan was there, and she dropped a bombshell. She says she was pregnant. Showing that Alex's mother, Geraldine, had sized up what sort of person Jordan was, she demanded that she took a pregnancy test in the house and show her the results. This confirmed that Jordan was indeed pregnant. Geraldine and Alex were concerned, to say the least. Alex had tried to break away from Jordan, and now she was telling him that she was carrying his child. Total respect to Alex, he stepped up and told Jordan that although they couldn't be together, he would support her and raise their child. However, Jordan then disappeared. Despite trying to contact her, Alex didn't hear from her or see her during the entire pregnancy. He was not at the birth of their first child, a boy called TJ, in May 2014, and only found out about this when Jordan sent him a message saying they had a son. It was not until August 2014, when TJ was 3 months old, that Jordan contacted Geraldine and asked if she wanted to meet her grandson. Despite her misgivings about Jordan, Geraldine of course said yes, and when she met TJ, she instantly fell in love. This was the first time that Geraldine had seen Jordan in a year, and she was fooled into thinking that she changed. Jordan said that motherhood had changed her, and her only focus now was on raising their son. Alex was wary, and so the first time he met TJ was without Jordan being present. Alex asked his grandfather, who he was especially close to also be there for support, and to meet his great-grandson. Alex too instantly fell in love. From that point on, Jordan would bring TJ around like clockwork every weekend to see his dad, and the two soon became inseparable. Breaking here, it's important to point out that domestic abusers will often progress relationships quickly and suggest taking huge steps soon after they've begun. This can include moving in together, but this can go as far as suggesting getting married or having children. In some cases I'm aware of, there have been men who have pierced holes in condoms with the deliberate intention of getting their partners pregnant. The reason for this is to form a bond with their partner and put them in a position where they would struggle to completely break away. Unfortunately, domestic abusers will often use whatever they can to victimize their partner. If they're married, they'll sometimes refuse to grant a divorce. In the case of children, due to their self-centeredness and utter selfishness, they will use them as pawns to hurt their former partner, demanding contact, even if they've been completely absent during the children's lives. They may also turn the children against their mother or use them to get information. Honestly, the way children are used in domestic abuse cases is truly disgusting. In this respect, I think it's likely that Jordan Worth deliberately became pregnant as she felt this would form a link with Alex, and that even if he wanted to escape, it would be far more difficult. He could leave her, but would he really leave his child? Her disappearance during the entire pregnancy is another example of her emotional manipulation, and I've no doubt this was deliberate, with her showing Alex who was in charge. So, you want to break up with me? Fine, but you don't get to be at the birth of your son. When he was born, she could then wave TJ in front of Alex and use him as a way to worm her way back into his life. And this is exactly what happened. Jordan also convinced Alex that motherhood had changed her, and over the next few months, the pair became closer and closer and spent more time together, until eventually, in January 2015, they rekindled their relationship. For a few short months, everything was fine. However, Jordan soon began showing her true colours. Her accusations of cheating started all over again. There was one instance in May 2015 which showed how unstable she really was. Specifically, whilst Jordan, Alex and TJ were driving in the local area one day, they came across the same family friend that Jordan had screamed at Alex's 18th birthday party in 2013. Despite the fact that almost 2 years had passed, Jordan began screaming abuse at this girl in the street. Word quickly got back to Geraldine, who confronted Jordan and said that this behaviour would not be tolerated again. In response, Jordan packed up TJ and Alex's belongings and gave him a choice, his family or her. If he chose his family, she would go, take their son with her, and never come back. Alex was put in an impossible situation, but he wanted to be in his son's life, and so the pair moved in with Jordan's family and then into a property together. Away from his family home, and especially when they moved into their own flat, Alex Skeel was trapped, and Jordan Worth quickly sought to utterly control him, including isolating him from his friends and family, who didn't see or hear from him for the next 2 years, before eventually starving him and subjecting him to horrific violence, which almost cost him his life. With TJ and Alex living at the family home, Jordan ramped up the level of control. She destroyed Alex's mobile phone and bought him another one with a new number, but he was forbidden from sharing this with his friends and family. She also deleted his Facebook account and set up a joint one, which only she had access to. As I said earlier, Alex didn't have contact with or see his friends and family for 2 years, and a legitimate question is why they didn't call the police if they didn't have contact with him for this long. The problem is they thought they were in contact with him. Jordan set up fake Facebook profiles and would send messages to his friends and family, apparently from Alex, mocking them and telling them to leave them alone. Geraldine tried to contact her son and, on one occasion, sent him £1 via internet banking with, quote, "I love you," written as the reference. In response, she received a message back saying, quote, "Leave me alone." In addition, Jordan had retained Alex's old SIM card, so would respond to messages sent to him, again telling people not to contact him anymore. So of course his friends and family were concerned, but to them, Alex had apparently chosen Jordan and didn't want anything to do with them anymore. Jordan Worth's emotional manipulation of Alex was nothing short of sickening. One day, she came home and told Alex that that she had received a message from his mother Geraldine telling her that his grandfather, who, as I said earlier, was someone he was very close to, had died. Alex was devastated and hysterical. He spent the next few hours crying, curled up in his bed, trying to come to terms with this horrific news. Jordan simply stood and watched. Eventually, she told him the truth. She was lying. His grandfather was fine. She began laughing and mocking him for how much he loved his family. Jordan's jealousy bordered on the pathological. She would accuse Alex of cheating morning, noon and night. She eventually took away his PlayStation so that he could not communicate with his friends, but especially other girls via gang chat. However, despite taking away every single means of him communicating with the outside world, the accusations continued. This included her accusing him of cheating on her during the year that she disappeared whilst pregnant with TJ, despite them not being together and this clearly being none of her business. It got to the point where Jordan forced Alex to quit his job and accompany her everywhere she went, and this included him attending classes with her at the University of Hertfordshire, where she was studying for a degree in teaching. So he would be forced to sit in lectures for a subject he had no interest in, just so Jordan could keep an eye on him and make sure he wasn't cheating on her. So why did Alex stay? Two primary reasons. Firstly, like most domestic abusers, this was not how Jordan acted all the time. There'd be periods, even though they became shorter and shorter, where she would be the Jordan he originally met. Loving, attentive and caring. The switch in her behaviour, which was entirely deliberate, messed with Alex's head. He didn't know whether he was coming or going. As time progressed, he started questioning his own reality, began to link him doing what Jordan told him to do with keeping the loving partner he used to know and wanted around, and keeping the monster at bay. Secondly, Alex stayed for his son. He was terrified that if he left Jordan, she would take TJ and disappear. I think he was unfortunately right. TJ was a tool to manipulate Alex, and I would question, as I'll come back to later, how much she actually cared about this child outside of what he gave her. The pair moved into their own flat in July 2016. This was only a short distance away from Alex's parents' house, but they had no idea that he was literally a stone's throw away, as their son had been completely cut out of their lives. There was a period of calm when they first moved in, and Jordan said she wanted to try for another baby, and almost instantly, she fell pregnant again. However, as soon as she was pregnant, Jordan the abuser returned. No doubt she felt emboldened with the fact they were now in a flat together. There were no witnesses. She could do whatever she wanted, and she did just that, and the abuse ramped up to a sickening new level, including physical violence. I quote Alex's own words extensively to explain what happened next. He stated, quote, "It began when she started sleeping with a glass bottle next to her. She was accusing me of doing things with other girls, talking to them or messaging, which was completely untrue. She kept saying that she'd had messages from people, but much later, I found out she'd been making it up. Then she'd wait until I'd fall asleep and smack me on the head with the bottle. She'd demand, 'What are you thinking about?' After a while, it got to the point where it didn't hurt anymore. I was so used to the pain, I didn't even feel it. So she'd ramp it up to the next level and find a worse way of hurting me. After the bottle, it was a hammer. After that, it was anything she could find to smack me with. One time, it was a laptop charger. She wrapped the cord around her wrist with a bit of slack and swung the metal plug end at my head. Blood started gushing out. It was pouring onto the floor. I cried, 'Please will you help me?' and watched Jordan as she walked up the stairs laughing. She said, 'Why don't you just go and die? No one cares about you.' Eventually, Jordan started with knives. She slashed at me. One time, she just missed a major artery in my wrist. Later in court, the full horror of what Alex was subjected to was laid bare. On one occasion, Jordan lunged at Alex with a knife, aiming for his face, with him having to put his hands up to stop from being stabbed in the eye. Then, the boiling water was introduced. Jordan would boil a kettle of water and pour it all over Alex. One of the most unhinged things she did was to buy a £5 lie detector test from the internet. Something that clearly is just a joke item, but to her it was deadly serious. She would force Alex to use this and bombard him with questions while standing with a kettle of boiling water. If the test indicated he was lying, she would pour the water over him. Alex's body was covered with third-degree burns, but Jordan forbid him from seeking medical attention. Instead, he had to treat his own injuries, wrapping them in cling film and football socks. At one point, Jordan beat Alex with a hairbrush, to the point where she broke one of his teeth. Again, he was told he couldn't see a dentist, so he had to pull out this tooth. Jordan wouldn't allow Alex to sleep in the bed with her. Instead, he was confined to sleeping on the floor, like an animal. On another occasion, Jordan forced Alex to swallow an entire bottle of sleeping pills. By this point, Jordan was in complete control of Alex's money. He had no access to his account or bank cards. This meant she was also responsible for buying food. When she did, this wouldn't be for Alex. He was starved to the point where, by the time this ordeal came to an end, in June 2017, he'd lost 20 kilos, or around 40 pounds in weight. Much of this abuse occurred whilst Jordan was pregnant, and in May 2017, she gave birth to their second child, a daughter called Iris. However, this didn't deter Jordan. She carried on abusing Alex day in and day out. Again, you may question why he stayed. Alex himself has answered this, stating, quote, "We had 2 kids together. I just kept hoping that something would change. The children were babies, but of course, they must have seen what was happening. And while she didn't hurt them directly, my fear was always that if I left, she'd turn her abuse on them. So I stayed." I've no doubt that Alex was right. Jordan Worth is a woman capable of just about anything, and this would have included harming the children. Alex stayed to stop this from happening. By June 2017, Alex Skeel was dying. His burns had become infected, and he was malnourished, but there was a deadlier issue which was slowly killing him. Specifically, due to the repeated physical assaults, mainly aimed at his head, Alex was suffering from hydrocephalus, a build-up of fluid on the brain, putting pressure on it. This can lead to symptoms such as memory issues, headaches, blurred vision, difficulty walking, and, if left untreated, can result in permanent brain damage or even death. Luckily, Alex's life was saved, but this was only because of his own bravery and the persistence of one police officer. Those of you who have watched my channel for a while will know that many of my cases highlight police incompetence. But on this occasion, we have an example of a man who clearly took his job to protect the public seriously. His name is Sergeant Ed Finn. On the 3rd of June 2017, neighbours called Bedfordshire Police, something they'd done on several other occasions due to hearing Alex being attacked. Each time, police had attended, excuses were made, and then they left. On this occasion, the call was made after neighbours heard a woman screaming and a male voice saying, quote, "Get off me, leave me alone, stop hurting me." Sergeant Finn and another officer attended, and they found a truly disturbing scene. Alex was sat gaunt and semi-conscious on the stairs, cradling his arm, and they found a significant amount of blood in the bathroom, along with a serrated knife. Jordan was there, completely unfazed, and she told the police that Alex had hurt himself. Jordan had actually attacked Alex with the knife, cutting his wrists, but she claimed these wounds were self-inflicted and that Alex had a condition where he had bouts of depression where he would harm himself. Sergeant Finn noticed other injuries on Alex and became instantly suspicious. Alex was taken to hospital, and it was found that the wounds on his wrist were so serious they required surgery. The nurses and doctors also saw all of his other injuries, including burn marks, old slash wounds and stab wounds, and missing teeth, and they were horrified. Alex was being prepped for surgery, but at that point, Jordan arrived and quickly walked Alex out of the hospital. This was despite the nurses and doctors begging him to stay. Why, you may ask, did Alex not raise the alarm here? He explained later, quote, "I was scared of Jordan and what she would do. I felt that if I said anything, she could have killed me." Sergeant Finn found out about this and was concerned. He knew he had to do something. An opportunity presented itself on the 10th of June 2017 when another call was made by concerned neighbours. Sergeant Finn asked for the job to be assigned to him, and he went to the property. I'll let Sergeant Finn and Alex explain what happened next.
We'll go upstairs. Are you alright down here for a minute, Jordan, yeah? Have you been assaulted or anything like that today?
No assault, nothing. It's just arguing. We're just so stressed out.
Are you 100% sure, Alex? Yes, 100% sure. I know you've said this to me the other night, and you're obviously saying it to me now, but are you 100% sure? Because you're not looking me in the eye, you're looking at the floor. So those injuries, you're saying you've done them to yourself. They could easily, because of where they are, they could easily not have been done to yourself, right? And just hear me out.
Even in the house, he was not budging on his story at all. He was absolutely adamant, no, I do this to myself, I do it to myself.
I didn't really want any commotion. I know if the police get involved, it would possibly be really difficult. I was always thinking, how would she react? If I did anything wrong or not what she wanted, she would go off her head. That was what was running through my head the whole time.
Yeah, of course.
I just wanted to try and be as much on his level as I could. You know, he's a few years younger than me, but not a dissimilar age. You know, we're both blokes. And I thought I need to get him out of this environment.
Let me go down A&E, mate, and get it redressed. Grab a jacket and some shoes, mate, whatever you got, wallet, whatever.
So wait, are you coming back here tonight? From A&E? Yeah. And then I'm going to come back here tomorrow? Yeah. Okay, so you don't really need to come to me?
So you know where each other are?
He sat me in the police car and he said, right, we're not leaving it until you tell me the truth. You need help, she needs help, your children need help, you all need help. And I still said, no, I'm doing this all to myself.
I turned my camera off and I said to him, look, my camera's off, it's just you and me in this car.
Straight away, I just said it. And I said, please just go on what the neighbours have said, because I don't want to say that it's come from me.
He just quite calmly said to me, yes, it was her.
I just need to explain to you that at the moment, you're under arrest on suspicion of assault occasioning grievous bodily harm.
I sat her down in the living room. I didn't really know what to expect in terms of how she was going to react, because she's very slight, very well-spoken, very polite, you know, to all intents and purposes, friendly and well-meaning young lady.
Obviously, it's serious because you have been arrested, yeah? But we'll go down and we'll have a chat at the police station and we'll get everything in black and white properly, give your side of the story on tape about what happened. Yeah? So what we'll do is we'll leave Iris with your parents. Yeah? Are you happy with that?
That's fine, yeah.
On the drive back, she was saying to me, you know, how long do you think I'm going to be in? Do you think it'll be maybe an hour? I said, no, it might be a bit longer than that. Sergeant Finn's intervention saved Alex's life and meant that he could get the medical treatment he needed. His extensive burns, which were infected, were dressed, and he had to have operations to close the wounds on his wrists and to relieve the pressure from fluid on his brain. Doctors said that Alex was 10 days away from death when he was finally brought to them. Alex could have continued to claim that nothing was wrong, and Jordan would have gotten away scot-free. But Alex was brave. He told the police everything. At this point, his parents were told the true horror of what had happened to their son. I cannot imagine what they must have felt seeing their boy, who had been reduced to this. Finally, after 2 years of separation, Alex was reunited with his family, including his blubby grandfather, who Jordan McCrawley told him had died. He was then able to start the long road to recovery, in his own bed, surrounded by people who actually loved him. Jordan Worth was interviewed by the police about the campaign of abuse against Alex, including controlling and coercive behaviour, and a catalogue of assaults, including burning him and attacking him with a knife. I want to play excerpts from the interview, which is truly bizarre and unnerving, but when you pick it apart, really gives an insight into the mind of Jordan Worth and highlights just how dangerous she is.
Alex seems relieved that he's now going home, back to his family. He feels he's been isolated from.
He always said he just didn't want to see his family.
He states that the majority of the contact with his family has been stopped because you've stopped him having contact.
No, definitely not.
Would you say at any point you have made it difficult for him to see his friends or family?
No, never. he made it very clear he didn't want to see any of his family. He said he hated his family, he doesn't want to talk to his family, he wants nothing to do with his family.
You're both very young, aren't you? How old are you?
22 and Alex 21.
Okay. So what you were doing?
I was holding a knife. I just
Tell me,
wanted him to come in the house.
tell me about the knife.
It was a big one from the kitchen. I think it was a bread knife, I'm not actually sure.
So how far do you think the knife went in, Jordan?
I don't think it went that far, but it did. There was a lot of blood.
We talked in detail about the incidents that happened on the 3rd of June and 10th of June when the police attended, okay? And you've accepted that you have thrown water over him that was boiling, okay? And you have accepted that you swiped at him with the knife and cut him, all right?
And the other times were just maybe like...
But you can't argue about those injuries because they're quite obvious because the burn marks and the cuts, okay? Because police attended on both these occasions, all right?
I appreciate it's stressful, you're both quite young, you've got young children. Do you suffer from any mental illness yourself?
No.
Ever suffered from depression?
No.
Any suffered from any postnatal depression after either pregnancy?
No.
Alex has said that since mainly that you've been living at this address, he has almost been attacked or physically put through some sort of assault pretty much every day since about September. He states if you missed a night of hitting him, you would then make up for it the next night.
No. I don't know why he would say that.
He says that you go at him about this period of time that you had a break in your relationship, okay?
It always goes back to that,
And that you question him relentlessly and that you go on about it a lot and that if he doesn't answer you, you then become violent towards him. Subjected him to a lie detector test.
Yeah.
Would you do that regularly?
No, we only did it I think it was like one day we did it.
This hairbrush that you keep in the car.
Well, whenever we've had an argument in the car, I'll grab just my hairbrush so it's on the side and I'll just sort of hit him either wherever I can. There was a hammer, but I never hurt him.
I'm not sure if you picked up on the same things that I did. So, Jordan is denying isolating Alex from his family, but then, so she's talking about going to the shops, admits stabbing him, hitting him with a hammer, and pouring boiling water over him. Oh, so she didn't always stab him, sometimes it was just tap, tap, tap with the knife. However, when she did stab him, it only went in a little bit. Oh, actually no, went in a lot, and there was loss of blood. But remember, she didn't hurt him. Also, look at her body language and demeanour. I hope you detected the little laugh whilst Jordan was talking at one point. Also, I'm not sure if you picked up on the almost childlike way she's speaking. Yes, she's young, 22 years old, but she talks like a teenager. Behavioural experts who have viewed her police interviews believe this was deliberate, with her presenting herself as meek and mild. It ought to cast doubt in the police's mind. Surely this small, petite, almost childlike woman would not do these things. Clearly, this is her controlling and manipulative nature coming out, but her tactics are really muddled. She's trying to dupe the police into thinking she's meek and mild, which you would think was part of her strategy to try and wriggle out of this. But then in the same breath, she's saying, oh yeah, I did stab him and poured boiling water on him. To provide a bit of context, if you've had any involvement in police interviews or seen transcripts of them, you'll know that no comment interviews are very common. The higher the offence seriousness, the more common they are. With domestic abusers, this is especially true. They want to control every situation, and when they say no comment, they're essentially saying, go on then, prove it. I would say this accounts for 95% of the interviews of domestic abuse I've come across, which is hundreds. Then you get the other, let's say, 4.9% who do speak. Almost always, they say, yes, I did these things, but she hit me first. you should see what she's like. She's unstable, she's unhinged. Then you have the 0.1% that admit everything and are genuinely sorry for their behaviour. Jordan Worth is none of these. She speaks, admits what she's done, doesn't claim her actions were a response to Alex attacking her, but also shows absolutely no remorse. And she's clearly trying to manipulate the police. Clear that Jordan Worth knew when the police got hold of her, she was in trouble. She was out of control, so her natural tendency to manipulate others came out. However, I think in her mind, she didn't really understand what she'd done wrong. She seems to know that isolating someone from their family is wrong. So yeah, I'll deny that. But stabbing someone and burning them with boiling water, what's the problem? Yeah, I'll admit that. And that's the danger of Jordan Worth. I think she admitted that she did these horrible things because her views of serious violence are so normalised that she thinks she's entirely justified in what she's done. So yes, I stabbed and burned someone I claim to love. So what? This would also explain her total lack of remorse and cold demeanour during interview. I'll bring everything together later in the video, but if this doesn't scream psychopathic traits, then I don't know what does. Jordan Worth was released on bail whilst the police built the case against her. TJ and Iris were taken from her care and placed with Alex and his family. Looking at Jordan's Facebook page, she carried on her life as normal, including going on a jolly to Portsmouth in July 2017, and on the 6th of September 2017, she attended her graduation at Hertfordshire University. So when this picture was taken, she was on police bail for almost killing her boyfriend. Finally, on the 28th of September 2017, Jordan Worth was charged with 17 offences, including coercive controlling behaviour within an intimate relationship and multiple counts of wounding, and the more serious charge of assault, causing grievous bodily harm. She was allowed to remain in the community whilst awaiting a court case, but moved to Norfolk. Like his past for bail conditions. Jordan Worth appeared at Luton Crown Court on the 16th of April 2018 and pleaded guilty to coercive controlling behaviour in an intimate relationship, as well as 2 of the counts of assault, causing grievous bodily harm. This had been agreed prior to the court hearing, with her pleading guilty as long as most of the charges were not proceeded with. This had nothing to do with remorse. Jordan Worth was unapologetic, but we'll get to that in a moment. Regardless, she'd been convicted. That same day she appeared before Judge Nick Madge. I don't have any sentencing remarks, but the Crown Prosecution Service outlined the case in detail over a number of hours, so the true evil of Jordan Worth was laid bare. For the systematic abuse of Alex Skeel, which almost cost him his life, Jordan Worth was sentenced to just 7 years in prison. A truly appalling sentence. What he'd been through, I think you'll agree. As I mentioned a moment ago, I've no doubt that Jordan Worth's guilty pleas had nothing to do with remorse or actually taking responsibility for what she'd done. She knew if she went to trial and was convinced of everything she'd been charged with, she could potentially be locked up for 15 or more years. She did what best suited her. After a conviction, and whilst Jordan was in prison, there was repeated activity on her Facebook page, with links to various articles about men abusing women being posted, as well as one about defamation of character. One link was to an article entitled, quote, "How can we protect our daughters from abusive relationships?" Now, it's naive to think that people in prison can't get hold of phones and get on the internet, so maybe this was her, or potentially it was someone close to her, likely a family member, uploading these things. Regardless of whether this was done by Jordan or someone directed by her, it shows how manipulative she really is, with her trying to portray Alex, the man she almost killed, as the aggressor and her as the victim. However, if this was a family member, as I suspect, this gives us an idea of the environment which shaped Jordan, being surrounded by people who would minimise and deny her behaviour. Jordan Worth was released from prison in January 2022 after serving half of her 7-year sentence. It didn't take her long to start lying and manipulating others, and I came across this frankly disgusting fundraising page, which must have been set up soon after her release, where she's trying to get donations to running the London Marathon. Her blog on the page states, quote, "The Centre for Women's Justice and my legal team, who have supported me personally over the last few years and are continuing to do so. They are experts in their field and support female offenders who have been subject to male violence and historical domestic abuse. They provide legal advice, assistance with public inquiries, inquests, and legal challenges. They ensure access to justice for female victims of male violence who find themselves in the criminal justice system due to resisting or retaliating to abuse. My case was complex and complicated, but CWJ gave me the time, effort, and energy to understand my case and support me. Please sponsor me to run the London Marathon to help raise money for them. What a sick woman. Essentially, she's blaming Alex for what she did to him. And worse still, the Centre for Women's Justice is an actual organisation which tries to help real victims of domestic abuse, and she was trying to use them to get sympathy and attention. However, Jordan didn't last long in the community, and on the 30th of September 2022, just 8 months after being released, she was recalled back to prison due to concerns about her behaviour, which included trying to control her boyfriend at the time, which was later reported to be a man called Adam Steph. Doing a bit of digging, it seems that this relationship began in 2021 when Jordan was in prison. Things get weirder after this point. In April 2023, so while she was back in prison, Adam and Jordan apparently became engaged. So based on this, the relationship started and the pair got engaged while she was in prison. This relationship is a massive red flag, which I'll come back to later. In July 2023, Jordan Worth went before the parole board and was granted re-release, with them stating that she'd done some courses and addressed her issues. It appears that, as of November 2023, Adam Steph and Jordan Worth are still together, and she's still out in the world. Will his name appear in a future news report as someone harmed by Jordan? I hope to God not, but I don't think there's any real evidence that Jordan Worth is any less dangerous or that she's changed. She came out of prison and began controlling her boyfriend, and the only thing stopping her from progressing this was being returned to prison. In around 2025, there'll be no oversight of Jordan, and I hate to think what will happen when there's no one watching her. She's only 26 years old, with plenty of time to ruin other men's lives. I don't think we've heard the last of her. I'll come to support services in a bit, but as a start, I want to return to what I said at the beginning of the video, where I was firm about not disrespecting survivors of domestic abuse, or those who have tragically lost their lives at the hands of people who claim they love them. The reason is because it reduces the likelihood that people going through this will seek support, but also diminishes the bravery of these people and their families who try to turn their horrific experiences into a campaign to help others. This is true of Alex Skeel, who is an absolute legend as far as I'm concerned. He barely escaped a relationship with Jordan Worth with his life, but instead of curling up into a ball or fading away, he waived his right to anonymity and has worked tirelessly to raise awareness about the fact that men can also be victims of domestic abuse too. He's also tried to encourage people to seek help. He's been interviewed numerous times and was the subject of a documentary for the BBC called Abused by My Girlfriend. I'll leave links to that show as well as interviews with Alex in the description box. However, I want to play a small part of one interview as it includes an important message.
So it's gone through court. She's now been jailed for 7.5 years. Have you had any word from her? Have you spoken to her? Has she said why she did this?
No. There's been no explanation at all, no.
It's all about your future then. What are you looking towards?
I hopefully want to start a charity up for abused men to help them get out of the situation or to help them recover if they had got out of the situation. And I just want to help people to speak out, to make it feel comfortable. I've done it and I'm in a far better place. If you don't talk about it, you're never going to get to that far better place. So at least give yourself a chance.
Unfortunately, men struggle to talk about their emotions to seek help. A lot of this is because of societal pressures. It's been instilled in many of us that these things don't happen to real men. We're scared of asking for help because we think it makes us look weak. People will mock us or abandon us and we'll be in a worse situation. Domestic abuse is a particular issue which I think is even more difficult for men to acknowledge, as it strikes at the heart of how many men see themselves. It's seen as something that only happens to women, which isn't true. Women are unfortunately more likely to be victims of domestic abuse with 1 in 4 experiencing this during their lives. But for men, it's a much higher rate than you probably realise, at around 1 in 7. So it's important to highlight, if you are a man experiencing this, it's not as uncommon as you think. You are not alone, and it's not your fault. It definitely doesn't make you any less of a man if it happens to you. I know you're scared, but when you do reach out, you'll be surprised to find that people, on an individual basis, just want to help you. They're like me. They don't care what gender you identify as, whether you're gay, straight, bi, black, white, Asian, pink with yellow spots, or whatever. They just see a person who needs help. This is whether you're suffering from general mental health issues or domestic abuse. Let me ask you this. If a man you cared about or loved came to you and asked you for help, would you mock them, shun them? No, you wouldn't. So why would you not be treated in the same way? As to being weak or a coward if you experience these things, do you think Alex Skeel was a coward? Dude is a boss as far as I'm concerned. You are not the one at fault. Your abuser is. They're the weak, pathetic one. No one, and I mean no one, deserves to be harmed by someone who claims to love them. I wanted to get this video out before Christmas for a reason. Unfortunately, there are spikes in the number of incidents of domestic abuse around Christmas for obvious reasons: an increase in alcohol use, having to spend more time with an abuser, the stress of wrapping presents, cooking the Christmas dinner. So it's important to reiterate support services, as I've done in my previous videos, which you can turn to over the festive period. As this video is trying to raise awareness about male victims of domestic abuse, I've labelled services for them, but we'll cover services for women as well. Just to say that all links and contact information will be in the description. So, in the UK, a great service for men is the Men's Advice Line run by Respect. You can contact them in various ways. You can speak to an advisor between 10 AM and 5 PM, Monday to Friday, on 0808 801 0327. You can also email them on info@mensadviceline, or one word, .org.uk, with a response being received sometime between Monday to Friday, 9 AM to 5 PM. Also, they have a web chat function, which is available through the website on a Wednesday between 10 AM and 11:30 AM, and a Thursday between 2 and 4 PM. This service is for men who are victims of abuse from women, as well as same-sex partners. Also, there's the Mankind Initiative, which offers support and advice to male survivors and current victims of domestic abuse. Their phone number is open weekdays, 10 AM to 4 PM, on 01823 334 244. I haven't forgotten my brothers in Ireland. For you guys, you can get support from Men's Aid Ireland. You can call them on their confidential advice line, which is 01554 3811. This operates Monday to Friday, 9 AM to 5 PM. Also, you can email them on hello@mensaid, or one word, .ie. Again, the emails will be responded to during working hours. In the United States, men can contact the National Domestic Abuse Hotline on 1-800-799-SAFE, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is completely confidential service. I've checked, and this service does have trained advisors who can help with men who suffer abuse in relationships. This is also the number that women should call for advice and support. I'm going to spend some time looking into more regional support services in the US, so please bear with me whilst I figure that out. With regards to women in the UK, a good first step is to call the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, run by Refuge, on 0808 2000 24/7. They'll offer confidential support and advice. You'll be speaking to a woman. There's also a live chat function where you can speak to an advisor Monday to Friday, 10 AM till 6 PM. You can also ask them to call you by filling in an online form, and it's clear they handle things professionally. You can include a false name or code word so you don't compromise your safety. Women's Aid is also another amazing organisation that offers advice and practical support, and they can be found at www.womensaid, or one word, .org.uk. The website has lots of information, as well as a live chat function, which is active between 10 AM and 6 PM, Monday to Friday, and 10 AM till 6 PM at the weekend. there's an option you can click on the website, which quickly takes you to a Google home screen if you need to hide what you're doing from your abuser. In Ireland, please call the National Domestic Abuse Helpline on 1-800-341-900.
This is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Also, I found a website that gives specific local support services across the whole of Ireland, so I'll leave a link to that as well. However, as I've said in previous videos, if you or someone you know is at imminent risk, then do not hesitate. Call 999 or 911 or whatever the emergency service number is in your area. Just going through all of that hopefully helps both men and women see there is support out there. There are dedicated people all day, every day, who just want to help. They want to help you realise that you are not the problem. They are the abuser. As hard as it may be to believe right now, you're worth so much more than you've been led to believe. Please reach out so others can help you. I knew about this case, but not in detail. I didn't realise until making this video just how dangerous Jordan Worth truly is. There's a lot to unpack here, but I need to provide context by reiterating the most common backgrounds, traits, and behaviours of domestic abusers. These individuals have almost always had extremely difficult childhoods, including being neglected or abused, both physically and sexually, witnessing domestic abuse, or being abandoned by either parent. This results in them having extremely low self-esteem, as well as a fear of abandonment and difficulties coping in life on their own, as well as managing stressful situations, for example, the breakdown of a relationship. These individuals are often dependent on their intimate relationships, but when they go into them, because they feel so low about themselves, they've already convinced themselves that it will come to an end, something they cannot cope with. So they need to utterly control their partner by destroying the person they are and turning them into essentially a shell, someone who will follow the abuser's commands and never leave them. In order to achieve this, various tactics are used, for example, making derogatory comments about them, such as calling them bitch or slag, all in order to make them feel unattractive, unlovable, and convince them that if the relationship ended, no one would ever want them again. Also, isolating them from friends and family. This is in order to make them dependent on the abuser, but also to cut off potential influence that may sever the hold they have, and or remove any avenue for escape. They're also often isolated with strict contact with people of the opposite sex, or same sex depending on the type of relationship, because they're scared that if their victim had this type of contact, they'll find someone better and leave them. Then there's emotional manipulation. One of the most common tactics is telling the victim that if the relationship ends, they will kill themselves. Violence is often used to punish any dissent in the relationship. If a rule is violated, then the result is a beating. This not only punishes the victim for what they've apparently done, but shows them the consequences of further non-compliance. It also causes fear in the victim, making them constantly on edge and scared, which erodes their self-esteem, feeds the security, and ultimately who they are as a person. I would say in my experience, 90% of the time, violence is used by perpetrators who themselves witnessed this growing up, and therefore they were taught that this is the way to behave. A domestic abuser's whole focus is on controlling their partner. This is why comments like, "Why didn't they just leave?" are so ridiculous, like they're telling someone just to walk to the shops. An abuser works extremely hard to close off every avenue of escape. Also, think about it logically. If you've been in a relationship with someone for any period of time, you know details about them, where they live, who their friends are, where they work, what their routine is. If the victim leaves, the abuser is going to use that information to find them. Also, with the most dangerous domestic abusers, they would rather kill their victim than relinquish control over them. And unfortunately, many of them do. Domestic abusers who escalate to this point are the ones with the most entrenched, pervasive issues with self-esteem and abandonment. They're the ones who, despite the fact they have total control over every aspect of their partner's lives, will still have convinced themselves that they'll be abandoned. They're the people who would accuse their partner of cheating on them repeatedly with no evidence, and their accusations can border on the delusional. As I said in the previous video, I was once involved in a case where a man accused his partner of having sex with their dead husband's ashes. I didn't actually say what happened in that case. He eventually tried to kill her by stabbing her, but by some miracle, she survived. These very dangerous people can literally create something out of nothing. If their partner even, on some occasion, looks at someone else, they could be accused of sleeping with them, even if they'd never been alone with that person or may not even know them at all. So the victim then ends up in a horrific situation, accused of cheating by someone who's already convinced themselves, in their delusional mind, that they are guilty. Deny it, they'll be punished for lying. Admit it, they'll be punished for cheating. They can't win. The violence and general abuse used by these most dangerous perpetrators is usually something on another level. Extreme acts of violence, overt threats of murder, all because of their sheer terror that if they don't achieve and maintain complete and utter dominance over their victim, they'll be abandoned. Jordan Worth, in my opinion, fits squarely within this extremely dangerous domestic abuser category. She is a woman with profound underlying issues regarding self-esteem, fear of abandonment, and she's clearly a woman who's completely dependent on intimate relationships and will go to absolutely any lengths to make sure they continue. As I said, this inevitably starts in her childhood, which means I find the statement made in court about her growing up in a loving, stable family home ridiculous. Potentially, we'll never know what she was exposed to as a child, but her issues are so extreme that I suspect that she was the victim of chronic neglect and, given the savagery of the violence she used, exposed to this in the home. It's important to point out that some of the abuse of Alex by Jordan occurred in her home, so I found he must have heard what was going on. And, as I said, I'd be surprised if her Facebook page was not being used by a blood relation to spread her lies. So this would suggest she grew up in an environment where her manipulative and abusive behaviour was normalised and likely justified. I don't believe for a second that Jordan Worth did not show any signs of problematic behaviour before abusing Alex. She's clearly a very skilled manipulator, so she likely honed her craft, potentially in other relationships or generally in her childhood, using others to get what she wanted. So she met Alex Skeel, someone she could latch onto, and from day one began chipping away at who he was and moulding him into a person who would never leave her. She began with criticising his appearance and clothing, subtle ways of getting him to do what she wanted, but also making him question himself. She ran off randomly one day to cause him to be scared about her. She messed with his head, switching from Jekyll to Hyde, all as a way to keep Alex continuously on the back foot and eventually questioning his perception of reality. Jordan cut off every avenue of escape, taking away Alex's means to communicate with those who loved him and who could have helped him, but being skilled enough to know that she needed to reach out every now and then, and this was to tell them, in the guise of Alex, that he didn't want anything to do with them anymore. As I said earlier, we cannot tell if Jordan got pregnant deliberately, but I have no doubt that she saw her children as a way to permanently link Alex to her. She didn't care about them. I've no doubt that she would have hurt the children if she thought it would have benefited her and enabled her to control Alex. But also, look at what she exposed them to. Her stabbing, beating, and burning their father right in front of them. Her level of sexual jealousy is off the chart. She saw any woman as a threat. If Alex was allowed to have even the briefest contact with any female, then he would leave her. She couldn't have that, so she made it impossible for him to communicate with anyone else but her. Even then, she repeatedly accused him of cheating on her, and from what I've read, even him thinking about another girl was unacceptable to her. The unhinged nature of Jordan Worth is perfectly encapsulated by the fact she bought essentially a joke toy online and used this as a way to interrogate Alex about him cheating on her. Within the flat, with no one watching, Jordan was free to continue to completely destroy the man that Alex was. She starved him, making him too weak to leave, and beat, burned and stabbed him day in and day out. I imagine Alex breathing the wrong way led to violence. He would only stay if he was utterly destroyed in every possible way. Alex is 100% correct. She would have killed him. He was her possession, and if he tried to leave on his own, she would have seen this as the ultimate betrayal. How dare you leave me? How dare you leave me to cope on my own? I can't bear the thought of you going off with someone else. If I can't have you, no one else can. These traits are bad enough, but there are two elements of Jordan Worth's personality which I think elevates her level of dangerousness even higher. The first of these are clear psychopathic traits, which I think is demonstrated by Jordan's demeanour during her police interview, where she shows no evidence of remorse, regret, or empathy for anything she's done. This indicates that she's willing to use horrific acts of violence without batting an eyelid. The other trait is sadism. I noticed something that Alex said in one of the passages I quoted about Jordan escalating from hitting him with a bottle to a hammer to using a knife as his tolerance to pain increased. I think this was entirely deliberate, that Jordan Worth wanted to see Alex in pain. I think she got some sort of thrill out of it. This again stems from the deep dark hole inside of her. She felt powerful, and it bolstered her self-esteem, knowing that she was the one who caused these things. Eventually, she poured boiling water over him, and then she could look at Alex's burnt flesh and broken teeth and think, I did that. So you have potentially a psychopathic sadist who's incapable of coping on her own, who appears to have no remorse or guilt for her actions, who seeks out relationships to rely upon and quickly begins to control her partners to the point where she'll completely isolate them, starve them, and brutally assault them, all so she doesn't have to confront her feelings of loneliness and fear of abandonment. Is Jordan Worth still a risk? Absolutely, and alarm bells are ringing right now. As I said earlier, domestic abusers move from relationship to relationship. This is clear evidence that they're just continuing the pattern of behaviour. With Jordan, this is even more extreme. While she was sat in prison for almost killing one boyfriend, she apparently started another relationship. Not only that, when she came out, she began to control him and so was sent back to prison. In amongst all of that, she lied and manipulated others, trying to blame Alex for her own actions. Like I said, I pray that her new partner is not harmed, but I think Jordan Worth is just as dangerous as she was when she abused Alex, and I can imagine her sat in a police interview room, being questioned on suspicion of murder, telling the police exactly what she did in a childlike voice, not showing any sign of emotion or sign that she's done anything wrong. At the center of this stood the Blackwood residence, a home that seemed to embody the American dream. From the outside, the Blackwoods appeared to be the very image of a perfect blended family. Terrence Blackwood, a distinguished man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair, had built a small empire in real estate development. His wife of 3 years, Lorelei, was a former model whose grace and charm had seemingly not faded with age. Ivy, Terrence's biological daughter from his first marriage, was a bright and ambitious college student, while Callum, Lorelei's son from her previous marriage, had recently graduated and was on the cusp of starting his own career. To their neighbors and friends, the Blackwoods represented success, unity, and the possibility of second chances. Terrence and Lorelei's whirlwind romance and subsequent marriage had been the talk of Maple Grove, a beacon of hope for those who believed in love after loss. The integration of their children into a cohesive family unit seemed effortless, a testament to their parenting and the adaptability of youth. Yet beneath this carefully cultivated image of familial bliss, currents of tension and secrets ran deep. The walls of their house held whispers of unspoken truths, forbidden desires, and simmering resentments. Terrence Blackwood's journey to the pinnacle of suburban success was paved with both triumph and tragedy. Born to working-class parents in Pittsburgh, he had clawed his way up the socio-economic ladder through sheer determination and an uncanny ability to spot lucrative real estate opportunities. By his mid-30s, Terrence had established a company that would eventually reshape the skyline of several mid-sized Pennsylvania cities. His first marriage to Elizabeth, a college sweetheart, had been a partnership of equals. Together, they navigated the challenges of building a business while raising their daughter, Ivy. Elizabeth's sudden death from an aneurysm when Ivy was just 12 had left Terrence a widower, forcing him to balance his grief with the responsibilities of single parenthood and an expanding enterprise. For 5 years, Terrence poured himself into work and fatherhood, his romantic life relegated to the back burner. It wasn't until a chance encounter at a charity gala that he met Lorelei Vaughn, a woman whose allure would reignite his passion for life and love. Lorelei's path had been markedly different from Terrence's. Discovered by a modeling scout at 16, she had graced runways and magazine covers throughout her 20s. Her marriage to photographer Julian Reeves had produced a son, Callum, but the union crumbled under the weight of Julian's infidelities and Lorelei's fading modeling career. Divorced at 35, Lorelei found herself navigating single motherhood and a world that seemed to value youth above all else. When Terrence and Lorelei's worlds collided, it was as if the universe had decided to grant them both a second chance at happiness. Their courtship was swift and intense, culminating in a lavish wedding that was the social event of the year in Maple Grove. The newly formed Blackwood family moved into the house, ready to begin their life together. Ivy Blackwood, now 20 and studying psychology at a prestigious university, had initially struggled with her father's remarriage. Fiercely intelligent and deeply loyal to her late mother's memory, Ivy approached her new family dynamic with a mixture of skepticism and reluctant acceptance. Over time, however, she found herself warming to Lorelei's genuine attempts at connection and the novel experience of having a brother figure in her life. Callum Reeves, 22 and freshly graduated with a degree in business, viewed his mother's marriage to Terrence with a pragmatic eye. He appreciated the stability and opportunities that came with being part of the Blackwood family, even as he harbored ambitions of forging his own path in the business world. Charming and adaptable, Callum seemed to ease into his role as stepson and brother with natural grace. As the family settled into their new dynamic, outsiders marveled at how seamlessly they had blended. Terrence and Lorelei were seen as pillars of the community, hosting charity events and involving themselves in local politics. Ivy and Callum's academic achievements were points of pride, held up as examples of the family's success. Yet behind closed doors, the careful balance of the Blackwood household teetered on a precarious edge. Unspoken desires, hidden resentments, and the weight of expectations created an atmosphere ripe for upheaval. As the summer heat intensified, so too did the tensions, building towards a crescendo that would shatter the illusion of their perfect life. July 15, 2023, dawned bright and oppressively humid in Maple Grove. The Blackwood household stirred to life with its usual morning rhythms, unaware that by nightfall, their lives would be irrevocably altered. Terrence rose early, his mind already racing with the day's agenda. A crucial meeting with investors was scheduled for the afternoon, potentially opening doors for Blackwood Development's most ambitious project yet. As he knotted his tie with practiced precision, Lorelei entered their ensuite bathroom, her silk robe whispering against her skin. "Morning, darling," Lorelei murmured, pressing a kiss to Terrence's cheek. "Any plans for dinner tonight? I was thinking we could try that new Italian place in town." Terrence's reflection frowned slightly in the mirror. "I'm not sure when I'll be back," he replied. "This meeting could run late. Don't wait up for me." Lorelei's smile faltered for a moment before she recovered, years of modeling having trained her to maintain a pleasant facade. "Of course," she said lightly. "Another time, then." Downstairs, Ivy hunched over a bowl of cereal, her eyes glued to her phone as she scrolled through social media. She barely glanced up as her father entered the kitchen, grunting a perfunctory good morning. Callum, ever the early riser, had already left for his internship at a local marketing firm. His absence was noted by Terrence, who had been hoping to discuss some potential business connections that could benefit his stepson's budding career. As Terrence gathered his briefcase and car keys, he paused to kiss Lorelei goodbye. With that, he was gone, the sound of his car engine fading as he drove away. The day progressed without incident. Ivy left for her summer job at the local library, while Lorelei busied herself with household tasks and preparations for an upcoming charity event. The house settled into a quiet lull, the calm before an impending storm. It was just past 3 p.m. when Terrence's car unexpectedly pulled into the driveway. His meeting had concluded early, a rare occurrence that left him with mixed feelings of triumph and unease. The deal had been secured faster than anticipated, leaving him with an unfamiliar stretch of free time. As he entered the house, the silence struck him as odd. Lorelei's car was gone, likely out running errands. Terrence loosened his tie, deciding to use this unexpected free time to relax before sharing the good news with his family. His footsteps echoed through the empty hallway as he climbed the stairs, intent on changing into more comfortable clothes. As he approached the upper landing, a muffled sound caught his attention. It came from Ivy's room, a mix of whispers and what sounded unsettlingly like stifled laughter. Concern and curiosity warred within Terrence as he approached the door. He raised his hand to knock, but something held him back. The whispers grew more distinct, and with a jolt, Terrence realized there were two voices, one unmistakably male. Without conscious thought, his hand moved to the doorknob. In the split second before he turned it, a part of Terrence's mind screamed at him to stop, to walk away, to preserve the sanctity of trust between father and daughter. But that voice was drowned out by a rising tide of parental concern and an irrational surge of anger at the thought of some boy in his daughter's room. The door swung open. Time seemed to freeze as Terrence's mind struggled to process the scene before him. On Ivy's bed lay his daughter and stepson, their entangled limbs in state of undress, leaving no doubt as to the nature of their activities. For a heartbeat, the tableau held. Terrence in the doorway, his face a mask of shock and dawning rage. Ivy and Callum, their eyes wide with fear and guilt, scrambling to cover themselves. Then, like a dam bursting, chaos erupted. Terrence's world narrowed to a pinpoint of fury and betrayal. "What the hell is going on here?" he thundered, his eyes darting between Ivy and Callum, who were frantically pulling on discarded clothing. But Terrence was beyond explanations. He rounded on Callum, who stood frozen. "You," he snarled, jabbing a finger at his stepson's chest. "How dare you? In my house with my daughter." With a roar of incoherent rage, Terrence lunged at Callum, his hands closing around the young man's throat. They stumbled backwards, crashing into Ivy's desk, sending books and ornaments clattering to the floor. Ivy screamed, pleading with her father to stop, but her words fell on deaf ears. Terrence's world had contracted to this single act of violence, his fingers tightening as Callum's face turned an alarming shade of purple. In desperation, Callum's hand scrabbled across the desk, closing around a heavy crystal paperweight. With the last of his strength, he brought it crashing against the side of his stepfather's head. Terrence's grip loosened as he staggered, blood streaming from the gash on his temple. But the blow had only served to further enrage him. He tackled Callum to the ground. The two men grappled on the floor, a frenzied tangle of limbs and fury. In the chaotic struggle, Terrence's hand closed once more around Callum's throat. Flined with rage and bleeding profusely, he squeezed with all his might. Callum's struggles grew weaker, his eyes bulging as he gasped for air that wouldn't come. Ivy's screams faded to background noise as Terrence poured every ounce of his betrayal and anger into his grip. It wasn't until Callum's body went limp beneath him that the red mist began to clear from his vision. Slowly, horrifyingly, the reality of what he had done began to sink in. Terrence released his grip and scrambled backwards, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he stared at the motionless form of his stepson. The aftermath of Callum's death plunged the Blackwood household into a nightmare of panic, guilt, and desperate decision-making. Terrence, his clothes spattered with blood and his mind reeling, stared at the lifeless body of his stepson as Ivy's hysterical sobs filled the room. "We have to call the police," Ivy choked out between gasps, her hands shaking as she reached for her phone. Terrence cut her off, his tone shifting from shock to a cold, calculated calm that chilled Ivy to her core. "Listen to me very carefully," he said. "This was an accident, a terrible, tragic accident. But if the police come now, they won't see it that way. They'll destroy our family, our lives, everything we've built." Ivy stared at her father, barely recognizing the man before her. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "We need to clean this up," Terrence replied, his mind already racing through scenarios. "Your mother can never know what really happened here. Do you understand?" For a moment, Ivy looked as though she might refuse. But then, whether out of shock, fear, or some twisted sense of loyalty, she nodded. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Terrence, drawing on skills he never knew he possessed, methodically erased all traces of the struggle from Ivy's room. Blood-stained carpets were torn up, furniture rearranged, and incriminating items bagged for disposal. Ivy, still in a state of shock, followed her father's instructions mechanically. She scrubbed surfaces, laundered clothes, and helped move Callum's body, wrapped in a tarp, to the garage. As twilight descended on Maple Grove, Terrence made a series of phone calls to his secretary, canceling all appointments for the next few days due to a family emergency. To Lorelei, his voice carefully modulated to convey concern rather than guilt, asking if she'd heard from Callum. To the local police, reporting his stepson missing, his tone a masterclass in worried parental concern. When Lorelei returned home, she found Terrence and Ivy seated in the living room, their faces grave. Terrence spun a tale of Callum storming out after an argument, of unanswered calls and growing worry. Ivy, her eyes red-rimmed from tears that were all too real, corroborated her father's story with a nod. As night fell, the Blackwood house became a hub of anxious activity. Friends and neighbors, alerted to Callum's disappearance, arrived with casseroles and words of support. Police officers came and went, taking statements and assuring the family that they were doing everything possible to locate the missing young man. Through it all, Terrence maintained his facade of concerned stepfather, his arm around a distraught Lorelei, his voice steady as he answered questions and thanked well-wishers. Only Ivy, watching her father with a mixture of fear and disbelief, knew the terrible truth that lay behind his performance. As the last visitors departed, and Lorelei finally succumbed to exhaustion, Terrence pulled Ivy aside. "Remember," he murmured, "this is to protect our family." Ivy, trapped in a nightmare of her own making, could only nod, sealing their pact of silence. As days stretched into weeks with no sign of the young man, the initial worry gave way to darker speculations. Detective Elias Thorne, a veteran of the police department, took charge of the investigation. A methodical and perceptive investigator, Thorne had seen his fair share of missing persons cases, but something about this one nagged at his instincts. His first formal interview with the Blackwood family took place in their immaculate living room, the atmosphere heavy with tension, barely masked by Southern hospitality. Lorelei, her eyes red-rimmed and hands clasping a barely touched cup of tea, recounted the last time she had seen her son. Thorne's gaze shifted to Terrence, noting the man's composed demeanor. "Mr. Blackwood, you reported having an argument with Callum the day he disappeared. Can you tell me more about that?" Terrence's response was measured, rehearsed to perfection in the dark hours of sleepless nights. "It was nothing serious," he explained. "Just a disagreement about Callum's career plans. I wanted him to consider joining the family business, but he was set on pursuing his own path. I may have pushed too hard. And you, Miss Blackwood?" he asked, turning to Ivy. "Did you witness this argument?" Ivy, her face a mask of carefully cultivated grief, shook her head. "I was at work. When I got home, Callum was already gone." As the interview progressed, Thorne probed gently but persistently, noting the family's reactions. Lorelei's genuine distress, Terrence's controlled responses, and Ivy's withdrawn demeanor all painted a complex picture that the detective couldn't quite decipher. In the days that followed, Thorne and his team delved deeper into Callum's life. They interviewed friends, colleagues from his internship, and even ex-girlfriends. A portrait emerged of a young man with ambition, charm, and no apparent reason to vanish without a trace. Yet as the investigation progressed, inconsistencies began to surface. Callum's phone records showed no outgoing calls or messages on the day of his disappearance. His car, found parked at a local trailhead, yielded no useful evidence. And most puzzlingly, none of his friends corroborated the story of plans to meet up on the day he vanished. As Detective Thorne pinned another lead to the growing caseboard in the precinct, he couldn't shake the feeling that the key to this mystery lay within the walls of their house. As weeks turned into months, the facade of normalcy at the Blackwood residence began to crack under the weight of their shared secret. Terrence threw himself into work with renewed vigor, his aggressive expansion of development raising eyebrows in local business circles. Lorelei's once vibrant social life withered as she retreated into a shell of grief and confusion. And Ivy, haunted by the dual specters of loss and complicity, withdrew from friends and studies alike. It was Ivy who first showed signs of breaking under the strain. Her nights were plagued by vivid nightmares, her days by a gnawing guilt that threatened to consume her. The sight of her father going about his life as if nothing had happened filled her with a mixture of awe and revulsion. One particularly bad night, after waking from a dream of Callum's accusing eyes, Ivy found herself in the kitchen, a glass of water trembling in her hand. She didn't hear Lorelei enter until her stepmother spoke, making her jump. "Can't sleep either?" Lorelei asked softly, her own face etched with the lines of chronic insomnia. Something in Lorelei's gentle tone, so reminiscent of Callum, broke through Ivy's carefully constructed walls. Before she could stop herself, words began to spill out. Disjointed at first, then in a torrent of confession. Lorelei listened, her face a canvas of shifting emotions, disbelief, horror, and finally a devastating understanding. When Ivy finally fell silent, tears streaming down her face, Lorelei did something unexpected. She pulled her stepdaughter into a tight embrace. "I knew," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I knew about you and Callum. I should have said something, should have stopped it. This is my fault too. As dawn broke over Maple Grove, they made a pact of their own to confront Terrence and bring the truth to light. Terrence's reaction to their united front was explosive. His carefully maintained composure shattered as he raged against their betrayal, his words a toxic mix of threats and pleas for understanding. It was in this moment of unguarded fury that Detective Thorne, arriving for a follow-up interview, overheard the damning confession through the open window of his unmarked car. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Police swarmed the Blackwood residence, securing the scene and separating the family members for questioning. Terrence, realizing the game was up, retreated into stony silence, requesting a lawyer. Ivy and Lorelei, however, unburdened by their confession, provided full statements. As the truth came to light, the community of Maple Grove reeled from the revelations. The illicit relationship between step-siblings, Lorelei's silent knowledge, and Terrence's fatal outburst painted a picture of a family torn apart by secrets and lies. In the midst of the chaos, Detective Thorne focused on the grim task at hand. With Terrence's reluctant cooperation, Callum's body was recovered from its hasty grave in a remote wooded area. The discovery brought a measure of closure to Lorelei, even as it sealed the case against her husband. The case against Terrence Blackwood seemed airtight, built on physical evidence and corroborating testimonies. Yet, as the trial approached, a new development threatened to upend the prosecution's carefully constructed narrative. Amidst the mountain of evidence being processed, a forensics technician made a startling discovery. DNA found under Callum's fingernails didn't match Terrence's profile. Instead, it pointed to an unknown male contributor. This revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. Detective Thorne, his certainty shaken, ordered a re-examination of all evidence. As the team delved deeper, more inconsistencies emerged. The angle of bruising on Callum's neck suggested a left-handed attacker, while Terrence was right-handed. Fibers found on the body didn't match those from the Blackwood home. Pressure mounted on the prosecution as these findings came to light. The defense, sensing an opportunity, pushed for all charges against Terrence to be dropped. However, the judge ruled that given the confessions and circumstantial evidence, the trial would proceed. Ivy and Lorelei, their united front beginning to crack under the strain of uncertainty, found themselves questioning their own memories of that fateful day. Had they been too quick to accept Terrence's guilt, blinded by their own complicity in the events leading up to Callum's death? As the trial date loomed, all parties involved grappled with the implications of this new information. The truth, it seemed, was far more complex than anyone had initially believed. In the courtroom, battle lines were drawn, with both prosecution and defense preparing to argue their interpretations of the increasingly convoluted evidence. The courtroom was packed on the day Terrence Blackwood was scheduled to take the stand. The air thrummed with tension as he was sworn in, his once commanding presence diminished by months in custody. As questioning began, Terrence's responses were measured, his demeanor calm, until the defense attorney broached the subject of the new DNA evidence. Terrence's composure cracked, his eyes darting to where Ivy sat in the gallery. In that moment, something seemed to break within him. To the shock of everyone present, he began to speak, his words pouring out in a torrent of confession, but not the one anyone expected. "I didn't kill Callum," Terrence declared, his voice raw with emotion, "but I am responsible for his death." He went on to describe the events of that day, but with a crucial difference. When he had walked in on Ivy and Callum, he admitted he had indeed been enraged, but it was Ivy, in a panic to protect her lover and their secret, who had lashed out violently. "I walked in and saw them together," Terrence recounted, his words echoing in the stunned silence of the courtroom. "I was angry, yes, but before I could even speak, Ivy grabbed the paperweight. She struck Callum again and again. By the time I pulled her off, it was too late." The courtroom erupted into chaos as Terrence described how, in a moment of paternal instinct, he had decided to protect his daughter. He had sent a hysterical Ivy to clean herself up, while he staged the scene to implicate himself, believing he could better weather the storm of a police investigation. "I never imagined it would go this far," he concluded, tears streaming down his face. "I was trying to protect my little girl, but I see now that I've destroyed us all." As Terrence's words hung in the air, all eyes turned to Ivy. Her face had drained of color, her body rigid with shock. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she could only manage a barely audible whisper. It's true. In the gallery, Lorelei collapsed into silent sobs, the full weight of her family's destruction finally too much to bear. Detective Thorne, his case shattered but his instincts vindicated, began the mental process of reconstructing the investigation. As Terrence was led from the stand, the courtroom remained in stunned silence, grappling with this final devastating twist in a case that had already defied expectations at every turn. The revelation of Ivy's culpability and Terrence's false confession threw the trial into disarray. The judge declared a mistrial, and both prosecution and defense scrambled to reassess their strategies in light of the new information. Ivy was immediately taken into custody, her bail hearing scheduled for the following week. The prosecution, caught off guard by the turn of events, requested time to review the evidence and potentially file new charges against both Ivy and Terrence. Ivy's defense team quickly began building a case around temporary insanity and crime of passion, emphasizing her youth and the shocking circumstances that led to her actions. They also didn't hesitate to shine a light on the questionable dynamics within the Blackwood household that had allowed the relationship between step-siblings to develop unchecked. The trials of Ivy Blackwood and Terrence Blackwood, though separate, were inextricably linked in the public consciousness. Ivy's trial came first, a somber affair that saw the once vibrant young woman appearing pale and withdrawn in the defendant's box. Her defense team, as planned, pursued a strategy of temporary insanity, bringing in expert witnesses to testify about the psychological impact of forbidden love and the fear of discovery. The prosecution painted a different picture, portraying Ivy as a calculating individual who had engaged in an illicit relationship and then committed murder to keep it hidden. They emphasized the brutality of the attack and Ivy's subsequent participation in the cover-up. Key testimony came from Lorelei, who spoke of her suspicions about Ivy and Callum's relationship and her regret at not intervening. Her words, delivered through tears, seemed to sway some jurors but alienate others who saw her inaction as complicity. After days of deliberation, the juries in both trials returned with their verdicts, bringing the legal saga of the Blackwood family to its conclusion. Ivy Blackwood was found guilty of second-degree murder, with the jury rejecting the insanity plea but acknowledging the crime's unpremeditated nature. The judge, taking into account Ivy's age and the unusual circumstances of the case, sentenced her to 18 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Terrence Blackwood was found guilty on charges of obstruction of justice and filing a false report. The judge, noting the unique circumstances in Terrence's eventual confession, sentenced him to 5 years in prison with 2 years suspended. As the Blackwoods were led from the courtroom for the last time, Maple Grove began the long process of healing and reflection, grappling with the knowledge that even in the most seemingly perfect communities, darkness can lurk behind closed doors. In the picturesque coastal town of Millhaven, where the salty breeze carries whispers of secrets and lies, a tragedy was brewing beneath the surface of everyday life. The quaint streets, lined with colorful boutiques and cozy cafes, masked a web of deceit that would soon unravel, leaving the community shaken to its core. At the heart of this tale are 3 individuals whose lives became inextricably intertwined. Lachlan Thorne, a man desperate for financial stability and respect. Zara Callahan, a talented chef with dreams bigger than the small town could contain. And Enzo Rossi, the charismatic owner of a popular Italian restaurant. To the outside world, Lachlan and Zara appeared to be the perfect couple, young and in love with a bright future ahead. Their engagement was the talk of the town, a beacon of hope in a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming in their relationship, cracks that would soon split wide open. Enzo, with his easy charm and successful business, seemed to have it all. His restaurant was a local institution, and his marriage to Vivian, a respected member of the town council, was envied by many. Yet, behind closed doors, Enzo harbored his own dissatisfactions and desires. As summer faded into autumn, the stage was set for a series of events that would lead to betrayal, blackmail, and ultimately, bloodshed. The story of how these 3 lives collided is a cautionary tale of passion, greed, and the devastating consequences of keeping secrets in a town where the truth always finds its way to the surface. Lachlan Thorne's story began far from the shores of Millhaven in a struggling mining town where dreams went to die. The youngest of 4 children, Lachlan grew up watching his father descend into the depths of the earth day after day, only to return home beaten down by the relentless toil. His mother, a part-time seamstress, struggled to keep the family afloat, her fingers constantly pricked by needles as she worked late into the night. From an early age, Lachlan vowed he would escape the cycle of poverty that had trapped his parents. He threw himself into his studies, earning a scholarship to a prestigious university in the city. But the transition from his humble beginnings to the world of academia proved more challenging than he anticipated. Surrounded by wealthy peers who seemed to navigate college life with ease, Lachlan felt like an outsider, constantly battling the feeling that he didn't belong. Despite his best efforts, Lachlan's insecurities began to manifest in self-destructive behaviors. He developed a gambling habit, convinced that one big win could solve all his problems. Instead, it left him deeper in debt, forcing him to take on multiple part-time jobs just to stay afloat. By the time he graduated, the promise of a bright future had dimmed considerably. Lachlan drifted from job to job, never quite finding his footing in the corporate world. His resume became a patchwork of short-term positions and gaps, each failure chipping away at his self-esteem. As his 30th birthday approached, he found himself back in a small town, not unlike the one he had tried so hard to escape. It was in Millhaven that Lachlan's luck seemed to change. He landed a job as a marketing manager for a local brewery, a position that finally allowed him to showcase his skills. More importantly, it was here that he met Zara Callahan. Their whirlwind romance offered Lachlan a glimpse of the life he had always dreamed of. Successful, respected, and loved. When he proposed to Zara after just 6 months of dating, Lachlan truly believed he had finally overcome his past. But old habits die hard, and the pressure to provide Zara with the life he thought she deserved began to weigh heavily on him. As wedding plans progressed, Lachlan found himself once again drawn to the false promise of easy money, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to tragedy. Zara Callahan's journey to Millhaven was paved with both passion and pain. Born to a free-spirited mother and an absent father, Zara spent her childhood bouncing between relatives' homes and short-term apartments. Her mother, Fiona, was a talented artist, but struggled with substance abuse, leaving young Zara to fend for herself more often than not. It was during one of their stays with Zara's maternal grandmother that she discovered her love for cooking. In her grandmother's warm, fragrant kitchen, Zara found solace and stability. She would spend hours watching the elderly woman transform simple ingredients into mouth-watering dishes, soaking up every technique and family recipe like a sponge. As Zara entered her teenage years, her mother's addiction worsened. At 15, Zara made the difficult decision to leave her mother's care, moving in permanently with her grandmother. It was a choice that haunted her, but one that allowed her to focus on her dreams. She threw herself into her culinary pursuits, working part-time at local restaurants while excelling in her high school's home economics classes. Zara's talent didn't go unnoticed. She earned a scholarship to a prestigious culinary school, where she honed her skills and developed her own unique style. Her instructors praised her innovative approach to traditional dishes, and her fellow students admired her dedication and creativity. However, just as Zara was about to graduate, tragedy struck. Her grandmother passed away suddenly, leaving Zara feeling unmoored once again. Grief-stricken and unsure of her next move, she deferred her dreams of working in a big city restaurant and returned to her grandmother's house in Millhaven. It was meant to be temporary, just long enough to settle her grandmother's affairs. But when she heard that the renowned restaurant was hiring, Zara saw an opportunity to gain experience while figuring out her next steps. She impressed Enzo Rossi with her skills and passion, and what was supposed to be a short-term position turned into years. Zara threw herself into her work, quickly rising through the ranks to become the restaurant's sous chef. She found a sense of family among her co-workers and began to put down roots in Millhaven. When she met Lachlan, it seemed like the final piece of her life was falling into place. Little did she know that the stability she had worked so hard to achieve was about to be shattered by a web of desire, deceit, and desperation. The restaurant stood as a testament to Enzo Rossi's unwavering ambition and culinary expertise. The restaurant, with its warm terracotta walls and the intoxicating aroma of authentic Italian cuisine, had been Enzo's dream since he first set foot in Millhaven 20 years ago. A first-generation immigrant, Enzo had arrived with little more than a suitcase full of his nonna's recipes and an unshakable determination to succeed. The early years were a struggle, with Enzo working grueling hours to establish his restaurant's reputation. His charm and culinary skills gradually won over the initially skeptical locals, and the restaurant became the go-to spot for everything from first dates to golden wedding anniversaries. Enzo took pride in knowing his regular customers by name, always ready with a warm smile and a perfectly paired wine recommendation. It was during this period of growing success that Enzo met Vivian, a local girl from a well-respected family. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a lavish wedding that was the talk of Millhaven for months. Vivian, with her sharp business acumen, helped streamline the restaurant's operations, allowing Enzo to focus on what he loved most, creating exquisite dishes in the kitchen. On the surface, Enzo appeared to have it all: a thriving business, a beautiful wife, and the respect of the community. He became a pillar of Millhaven society, sponsoring local events and mentoring aspiring chefs at the high school. His annual charity dinners were legendary, raising substantial funds for various community projects. However, as the years passed, cracks began to appear in Enzo's seemingly perfect life. The long hours at the restaurant took their toll on his marriage. Vivian, now deeply involved in local politics, had less and less time for the romantic gestures that had once characterized their relationship. Their conversations, once filled with dreams and laughter, became focused on business strategies and social obligations. Enzo found himself increasingly restless, yearning for the passion that seemed to have faded from his life. He threw himself into his work, constantly innovating and expanding the restaurant's menu. But even his beloved kitchen began to feel like a gilded cage, trapping him in a life that no longer brought him joy. As he approached his 50th birthday, Enzo felt a growing sense of dissatisfaction. He began to question the choices that had led him to this point, wondering if he had sacrificed too much of himself in pursuit of success. It was in this state of emotional vulnerability that Enzo first began to see Zara as more than just his talented sous chef, setting the stage for a relationship that would have far-reaching and ultimately tragic consequences. The spark between Enzo and Zara ignited on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening in late autumn. The restaurant was uncharacteristically quiet, with only a handful of patrons braving the stormy weather. As closing time approached, Enzo found himself alone in the kitchen with Zara, both of them working in comfortable silence to prepare for the next day. It was Zara who broke the quiet, suggesting a new twist on one of the restaurant's classic dishes. Enzo, intrigued, invited her to demonstrate. As they worked side by side, chopping herbs and sautéing vegetables, Enzo was struck by Zara's passion and creativity. Her eyes lit up as she explained her ideas, and Enzo found himself drawn in not just by her culinary skills, but by her vibrant energy. As they tasted the finished dish together, their eyes met over the steaming plate. In that moment, something shifted between them. Enzo, caught off guard by the intensity of his feelings, made a casual comment about the late hour and suggested they call it a night. But as Zara gathered her things to leave, a clap of thunder startled her, causing her to drop her bag. Enzo rushed to help, and as they both reached for the scattered contents, their hands touched. The physical contact, brief as it was, sent a jolt through both of them. Before either could fully process what was happening, they found themselves in each other's arms, sharing a passionate kiss that left them both breathless and confused. In the days that followed, Enzo and Zara tried to maintain a professional distance, but the tension between them was palpable. Stolen glances across the kitchen, lingering touches as they passed each other in the narrow hallways. It was only a matter of time before they gave in to their desires. Their first real encounter happened after hours in Enzo's office. What started as a discussion about the next season's menu quickly evolved into a heated expression of their pent-up passion. As they lay tangled together on the small leather sofa, both Enzo and Zara knew they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. For Zara, the affair was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The exhilaration of being with Enzo was constantly at war with her guilt over betraying Lachlan. She told herself it was just a physical thing, that her feelings for her fiancé remained unchanged. But as the weeks passed, she found herself increasingly drawn to Enzo, not just physically but emotionally as well. Enzo, for his part, felt rejuvenated by the relationship. With Zara, He rediscovered the passion he had been missing both in and out of the kitchen. He convinced himself that he deserved this happiness, that the years of dedication to his wife and his business entitled him to this secret indulgence. As summer turned to fall, their affair deepened, becoming more than just stolen moments of physical intimacy. Neither Enzo nor Zara were prepared for the storm that was brewing, threatening to destroy everything they had built. Lachlan Thorne prided himself on his ability to read people, a skill honed through years of navigating the corporate world. So when Zara's behavior began to change subtly, he noticed. It started with small things. She was working later hours, seemed distracted during their time together, and was constantly checking her phone. At first, Lachlan attributed it to the stress of wedding planning and her increased responsibilities at the restaurant. But as the weeks passed, a nagging suspicion began to take root in his mind. One evening, as they sat on opposite ends of the couch, ostensibly watching a movie together, Lachlan observed Zara smiling at her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as she typed out a message. When he casually asked who she was texting, Zara's response was too quick, too rehearsed. "A coworker?" she said, discussing a new recipe. But the flush on her cheeks and the way she quickly locked her phone told a different story. Determined to uncover the truth, Lachlan began to pay closer attention to Zara's schedule and movements. He noted the nights she came home particularly late, the weekends she claimed to be doing inventory at the restaurant. He even drove by the restaurant a few times, noting with growing unease that Zara's car was often the only one in the parking lot, besides Enzo's distinctive vintage Alfa Romeo. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place on a crisp autumn evening. Lachlan, unable to shake his suspicions, decided to surprise Zara at work. As he approached the restaurant, he saw two figures silhouetted in the dim light of the kitchen. Through the window, he watched in stunned silence as Enzo pulled Zara close, their lips meeting in a passionate kiss. The sight hit Lachlan like a physical blow. He stumbled back to his car, his mind reeling. All the little inconsistencies, the late nights, the distracted behavior. It all made sense now. The woman he loved, the woman he had planned to spend his life with, was having an affair with her boss. As he sat in his car watching the restaurant, a toxic mixture of emotions coursed through him. Hurt, betrayal, anger, but also surprisingly a cold calculation. Lachlan had always prided himself on his ability to turn situations to his advantage, and as the initial shock wore off, his mind began to work. He thought about the upcoming wedding, the deposits they had already paid. He thought about the shame of calling it off, of admitting to friends and family that he had been deceived. And then he thought about the restaurant, about Enzo's wealth and success. A plan began to form in Lachlan's mind. If Zara thought she could betray him and get away with it, she was sorely mistaken. He would make her pay, quite literally, and in doing so, he would secure the financial stability he had always craved. As he started his car and drove away from the restaurant, Lachlan's hurt and betrayal hardened into resolve. Zara's infidelity would be her downfall, and his ticket to the life he deserved. Lachlan bided his time, carefully planning his next move. He needed irrefutable evidence before confronting Zara. Over the next week, he meticulously documented her comings and goings, even going so far as to plant a small voice-activated recorder in her car. It was an invasion of privacy that made him feel dirty, but he justified it as necessary, given the circumstances. When he finally had what he needed, a recording of Zara and Enzo in an intimate conversation that left no doubt about their relationship, Lachlan set his plan in motion. He chose a quiet Sunday morning, when Zara was relaxed and off guard, to spring his trap. "Lachlan, I know about you and Enzo," he said without preamble as Zara sipped her coffee. The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. Her face, drained of color, told him everything he needed to know. What followed was a conversation filled with tears, recriminations, and desperate pleas. Zara begged for forgiveness, swearing that the affair meant nothing, that Lachlan was the one she truly loved. But Lachlan had steeled himself against her explanations. He laid out his terms coldly. If she wanted to keep their engagement intact and avoid the scandal of her affair being exposed, she would have to do exactly as he said. His demands were simple yet devastating. Zara would use her position at the restaurant to embezzle money, skimming from the daily takings and manipulating the books to cover her tracks. The amount would start small but increase over time. Lachlan framed it as restitution, compensation for the hurt and humiliation she had caused him. Zara, Caught between her guilt and her fear of losing everything, reluctantly agreed. She rationalized that it would be temporary, that she could find a way out of this situation without anyone getting hurt. But deep down, she knew she had set foot on a dangerous path. The scheme began slowly. Zara, leveraging her trusted position and her access to the restaurant's financial systems, started by pocketing small amounts from the cash register, no more than $50 at a time. She meticulously altered the daily reports, adjusting inventory numbers and falsifying receipts to cover her tracks. Each time she handed the stolen money to Lachlan, she felt a piece of her soul crumble away. Lachlan, for his part, treated the whole affair with a chilling detachment. He set up a separate bank account to deposit the stolen funds, careful to keep the transactions below amounts that might trigger suspicion. To the outside world, he played the role of the doting fiancé, but in private, he was cold and demanding, constantly pressing Zara for more. As weeks turned into months, the amounts grew larger. Lachlan's appetite for money seemed insatiable, and Zara found herself taking greater risks to meet his demands. She began to manipulate the payroll, creating ghost employees and diverting their salaries. She falsified supplier invoices, pocketing the difference between the actual and inflated costs. The stress of maintaining the deception took its toll on Zara. She lost weight, dark circles forming under her eyes from sleepless nights spent agonizing over her actions. Her once bubbly personality became subdued, her passion for cooking diminishing, as the kitchen she once loved became a constant reminder of her betrayal. Lachlan, however, thrived. The influx of cash allowed him to pay off his gambling debts and even start making risky investments in the stock market. He began to dress better, drive a newer car, and talk about purchasing a house, all under the guise of planning for their future together. As the wedding date approached, Zara found herself trapped in a nightmare of her own making. The thought of marrying Lachlan filled her with dread, but she saw no way out. She had committed crimes, betrayed not only her fiancé but also Enzo in the restaurant that had given her a chance. The weight of her actions pressed down on her, making each day a struggle to maintain the facade of normality. Little did Zara know that her carefully constructed house of cards was about to come tumbling down. Enzo, sharp-eyed and attentive to his business, had begun to notice discrepancies in the books. The confrontation that was brewing would set in motion a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. Enzo Rossi had built his restaurant empire on attention to detail, and it was this meticulous nature that first alerted him to the problem. Small inconsistencies in the daily reports, slight discrepancies in the inventory. Individually, they were easy to overlook, but collectively, they painted a troubling picture. At first, Enzo attributed the errors to simple mistakes or software glitches. He spent long nights poring over spreadsheets, trying to reconcile the numbers. But as the discrepancies continued to mount, a sinking feeling settled in his stomach. Someone was stealing from him, and given the nature of the manipulations, it had to be someone with intimate knowledge of the restaurant's operations. His suspicions inevitably turned to Zara. She had access to all the systems, and the changes had begun around the time their affair started. The thought that she might be betraying him professionally as well as personally was almost too much to bear. Enzo chose a quiet afternoon to confront Zara, calling her into his office under the pretense of discussing a new menu. As soon as the door closed behind her, the facade dropped. He laid out the evidence he had gathered, watching her face carefully for any reaction. Zara's world seemed to crumble around her. Caught between her loyalty to Enzo and her fear of Lachlan, she broke down, confessing everything through a flood of tears. She told Enzo about Lachlan's discovery of their affair, the blackmail, and the escalating demands for money. Enzo listened in stunned silence, a maelstrom of emotions raging within him. Anger at the betrayal warred with concern for Zara, and fear for his own reputation. The revelation of the theft was bad enough, but if word of their affair got out, it would destroy not only his marriage, but also the carefully cultivated image he had built in the community. In the end, self-preservation won out. Enzo made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. He wouldn't go to the police. The risk of exposure was too great. Instead, he would handle this internally. He demanded that Zara end things with Lachlan immediately and return every cent that had been stolen. In return, he would keep quiet about her crimes. What Enzo didn't realize was that his decision to keep the police out of it would set in motion a dangerous chain of events. Lachlan, already teetering on the edge of desperation, would not take kindly to having his source of money cut off. And Zara, caught between two men and her own guilt, was a ticking time bomb of emotions. As Zara left Enzo's office, both of them believed they had found a solution. In reality, they had merely set the stage for a confrontation that would end in tragedy. In the days following her confrontation with Enzo, Zara felt as if she were walking on a tightrope, constantly on the verge of losing her balance. She knew she had to end things with Lachlan, but the thought filled her with dread. Lachlan had already shown how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted, and she feared his reaction to being cut off. Lachlan, oblivious to the shift in dynamics, continued to press Zara for more money. His demands had become increasingly erratic. Fueled by early success in his stock market gambles, he talked of quitting his job, of investing full-time, painting pictures of a lavish future that made Zara's stomach churn with anxiety. When Zara finally gathered the courage to confront Lachlan, the conversation quickly spiraled out of control. She told him about Enzo's discovery, her voice shaking as she explained that there would be no more money. Lachlan's reaction was explosive. He raged at her, accusing her of choosing Enzo over him, threatening to expose their affair and her theft to the entire town. In a moment of desperation, Zara blurted out that Enzo already knew about the affair, that he had chosen to keep it quiet to protect his own reputation. It was the wrong thing to say. Lachlan's anger transformed into a cold, calculating fury. If Enzo was willing to cover up the theft to hide the affair, Lachlan reasoned, then perhaps there was still a way to profit from the situation. Over the next few days, Lachlan began to formulate a new plan. He started showing up at the restaurant during busy hours, making vague comments within earshot of staff and customers. He sent anonymous letters to Vivian, hinting at her husband's infidelity without providing concrete details. Each move was designed to ratchet up the pressure on Enzo, to push him towards a breaking point. Zara watched this unfolding disaster with a sense of helpless dread. She tried to warn Enzo, but he was already retreating into himself, becoming paranoid and short-tempered. The once bustling kitchen of the restaurant became a pressure cooker of tension, with staff picking up on the strained atmosphere between Enzo and Zara. As Lachlan's actions became bolder, Enzo's grip on the situation began to slip. He started drinking heavily, making careless mistakes in the kitchen. Vivian, picking up on the whispers and her husband's strange behavior, became increasingly suspicious and confrontational. The carefully constructed lives of all involved were unraveling at an alarming rate. It was clear that something had to give, but no one could have predicted the violent culmination that was about to unfold in the very place where it all began, the kitchen of the restaurant. The night that changed everything started like any other at the restaurant. The dining room hummed with the chatter of patrons, the clink of cutlery against fine china, and the soft strains of Italian music. But in the kitchen, the atmosphere was charged with an almost palpable tension. Enzo had been drinking since the afternoon, his movements becoming increasingly erratic as he barked orders at his staff. Zara worked silently at her station, her eyes constantly darting to the door, dreading Lachlan's now nightly appearance to taunt them. It was just past 9 when Lachlan pushed through the kitchen doors, his face flushed with a dangerous combination of alcohol and bravado. "Enzo, you and I need to have a chat," he announced loudly, causing several of the kitchen staff to pause in their work. Enzo, his patience already worn thin, gestured sharply for Lachlan to follow him into the small office adjacent to the kitchen. Zara, her heart pounding, trailed after them, determined to prevent the confrontation she had been fearing. The next few minutes were a blur of shouting and accusations. Lachlan, emboldened by drink, laid out his demands, a substantial sum of money in exchange for his silence. Enzo, equally inebriated, refused, his face purpling with rage as he yelled at Lachlan to get out of his restaurant. Zara tried to intervene, pleading with both men to calm down, to think rationally. But her words fell on deaf ears. The situation escalated rapidly, with Lachlan grabbing a knife from a nearby prep table, and Enzo lunging for the gun he kept hidden in his desk drawer for emergencies. What happened next would be debated in the courts for months to come. In the chaos of the moment, with Zara screaming for them to stop, a shot rang out. The bullet, whether by intent or accident, struck Lachlan in the chest. He staggered backward, a look of shock on his face before crumpling to the floor. The kitchen erupted into pandemonium. Staff members rushed in, drawn by the sound of the gunshot. Someone called for an ambulance, while others tried to stem the flow of blood from Lachlan's wound. Enzo stood frozen, the gun still in his hand, as the full impact of what had just occurred washed over him. Zara, in a state of shock, found herself mechanically reciting the events to the police officers who arrived on the scene. She watched as Lachlan was stretchered out, his fate uncertain, and as Enzo was led away in handcuffs, still protesting that it had been self-defense. As the adrenaline of the moment faded, the weight of her role in the tragedy began to sink in. Her affair with Enzo, her agreement to Lachlan's blackmail scheme, her failure to come clean earlier, all of it had led to this moment. The life she had carefully built in Millhaven lay in ruins around her, and she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The shot fired in the kitchen of the restaurant that night echoed far beyond its walls, setting in motion a series of events that would captivate and horrify the small coastal town for years to come. In the days following the shooting, Millhaven found itself thrust into an unwelcome spotlight. News vans lined the streets, reporters eager for any morsel of information about the tragedy that had unfolded in the town's beloved Italian restaurant. The investigation moved quickly, with detectives piecing together the complex web of relationships and motivations that had led to that fateful night. Zara, racked with guilt and exhaustion, provided a full confession, detailing the affair, the blackmail, and the theft. Her cooperation proved crucial in unraveling the full extent of the situation. Lachlan, having survived the initial shooting, clung to life in the intensive care unit of Millhaven General Hospital. As he recovered, he too began to talk, his version of events largely corroborating Zara's account, though colored by his own perspective of victimhood. Enzo, initially held on attempted murder charges, maintained his claim of self-defense. The discovery of the knife near where Lachlan had fallen lent some credence to his story, but the circumstances surrounding the confrontation complicated matters. As the details of the case became public, the town reeled from the revelations. The image of the restaurant as a charming family restaurant was shattered, replaced by lurid tales of adultery and financial crimes. Vivian, devastated by her husband's infidelity and the public humiliation, filed for divorce and resigned from her position on the town council. The employees of the restaurant found themselves suddenly out of work as the restaurant was closed indefinitely, its future uncertain. Many in the town felt betrayed, their trust in people they had considered pillars of the community irreparably damaged. As the case moved towards trial, plea negotiations began behind the scenes. Prosecutors, aware of the complexities of the case and the potential for a lengthy, sensational trial, were open to deals that would avoid a public spectacle. Zara, advised by her lawyer and hoping to avoid a harsh sentence, agreed to testify against both Lachlan and Enzo in exchange for leniency. Lachlan, facing charges of extortion and conspiracy, sought a similar arrangement, eager to paint himself as a victim of circumstance rather than an instigator. Enzo, however, remained adamant about his innocence, insisting on his right to a trial. His defense team began to construct a narrative of a hard-working businessman driven to desperate measures by threats and blackmail. As the legal machinery ground forward, the residents of Millhaven were left to grapple with the aftermath of the tragedy. Trust had been broken, reputations shattered, and the very fabric of the community tested. The true cost of the events at the restaurant, it seemed, would be paid not just by those directly involved, but by the entire town. The jury, while sympathetic to the pressures he had faced, couldn't overlook the fact that he had escalated the confrontation by producing a gun. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5. Zara Callahan, in exchange for her testimony and full cooperation, received a suspended sentence and probation for her role in the embezzlement scheme. The judge, taking into account her remorse and the coercion she had faced, opted for leniency. However, her career in the culinary world was effectively over, her reputation irreparably tarnished. Lachlan Thorne, who survived the shooting but was left with permanent injuries, pleaded guilty to extortion and blackmail charges. He received a 5-year prison sentence, with the judge noting the calculated nature of his actions and the devastating consequences they had wrought. The restaurant never reopened its doors. The building stood empty for years, a stark reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. At the heart of this story are two couples. Isabella and Russell Hawthorne, both in their early 50s, had been fixtures of the community for over 2 decades. They were the couple everyone looked up to, successful, well-respected, and seemingly happily married. Their home was often the center of neighborhood gatherings. Just 3 houses down, the newly wedded Zara and Eric Donovan had recently moved in. Both in their mid-20s, they brought a youthful energy to the street that had long been dominated by older families and retirees. Their arrival was met with curiosity and warmth by their neighbors, particularly the Hawthorns. Little did anyone know that the lives of these 4 individuals would soon become entangled in a web of desire, obsession, and murder. What began as a daring experiment in sexual exploration would spiral into a nightmare that would leave 1 dead, 1 behind bars, and 2 others grappling with the consequences of their choices. This is the story of how a seemingly innocent proposition led to a brutal crime that would be splashed across national headlines and forever change the lives of those involved. It's a cautionary tale of the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most ordinary seeming individuals and the devastating consequences of stepping outside societal norms. Isabella Hawthorne had always been the golden girl. Growing up in Seattle, she was the captain of her high school cheerleading squad, prom queen and valedictorian. But Isabella was more than just a pretty face. She had a sharp mind and boundless ambition. She met Russell Hawthorne during her sophomore year at the University of Washington. Russell, 2 years her senior, was the star quarterback with a bright future ahead of him. Their courtship was the stuff of campus legend, the perfect couple that everyone envied. They married shortly after Isabella's graduation, with dreams of conquering the world together. Russell's promising football career was cut short by a knee injury in his first year as a professional player. He pivoted to sports management, quickly climbing the corporate ladder. Isabella, meanwhile, pursued a career in marketing, her creativity and drive making her a rising star in the field. Their move coincided with the birth of their daughter, Lily. They threw themselves into parenthood and their careers with equal fervor. From the outside, they seemed to have it all: successful careers, a beautiful home, and a loving family. But as the years went by, cracks began to appear in their perfect facade. Russell's work kept him away from home for longer stretches, and he began to put on weight, losing the athletic physique that had first attracted Isabella. For her part, Isabella found herself increasingly restless. With Lily away at college, the house felt empty, and her job no longer provided the satisfaction it once did. Isabella began to wonder if this was all there was to life. She started yoga classes and joined a book club, searching for something to fill the growing void she felt. She found herself envying the young couples she saw, with their passionate embraces and carefree laughter. When was the last time she and Russell had shared such moments? Russell, oblivious to his wife's discontent, continued his routine of long hours at the office, followed by evenings in front of the TV with a beer in hand. Their conversations became perfunctory, limited to discussions about bills, home maintenance, and occasional updates about Lily. As her 50th birthday approached, Isabella felt a growing sense of panic. Was this how she would spend the rest of her life? The woman who had once been voted most likely to succeed now felt trapped in a gilded cage of her own making. It was in this state of mind that Isabella first laid eyes on Eric Donovan. Young, handsome, with a lean swimmer's build, Eric represented everything that was missing from Isabella's life: excitement, passion, and the promise of adventure. For the first time in years, Isabella felt a stirring of desire. As she watched Eric and his young wife Zara move into the neighborhood, an idea began to form in her mind. An idea that would change everything. Zara Donovan, born Zara Khalil, was the daughter of Lebanese immigrants who had settled in Portland 2 decades earlier. Growing up, she had always felt caught between 2 worlds: the traditional values of her parents and the liberal, free-spirited culture of the Pacific Northwest. With her olive skin, Zara stood out in a city that was predominantly white. From a young age, Zara showed a passion for art. Her parents, while supportive, always emphasized the importance of a practical career. As a compromise, Zara studied graphic design at Portland State University, finding a way to merge her creative instincts with a marketable skill. It was during her final year at PSU that Zara met Eric Donovan. She was working on her thesis project at a local coffee shop when Eric, a barista there, struck up a conversation about her sketches. Eric, with his easy charm and boyish good looks, immediately captured Zara's attention. Eric had grown up in a small town in rural Oregon, the youngest of 4 boys in a working-class family. He'd moved to Portland 3 years earlier, drawn by the city's vibrant art scene and progressive culture. While he worked as a barista to pay the bills, his true passion was photography. His Instagram account, filled with moody black and white portraits in stark urban landscapes, had a modest but growing following. Their romance was a whirlwind. Within weeks of their first meeting, Eric and Zara were inseparable. They spent their days exploring Portland's hidden gems, secret gardens, underground art galleries, hole-in-the-wall music venues. Eric introduced Zara to urban exploration, and she in turn taught him about Lebanese cuisine and culture. To Zara, Eric represented freedom and self-expression. He encouraged her to pursue her art without compromise, to break free from the expectations of her family and society. With Eric, Zara felt seen and understood in a way she never had before. For Eric, Zara was his muse and his anchor. Her quiet strength and unwavering support gave him the confidence to pursue his photography more seriously. He began to book small gigs, weddings, local band promotional shots, even a few magazine spreads. Their decision to get married came as a surprise to many who knew them. Both sets of parents expressed concern about the speed of their relationship, but Eric and Zara were convinced they had found their soulmates. They had a small ceremony in a sculpture garden, surrounded by their closest friends and family. The move was a practical decision. As freelancers, they needed a space that could serve as both home and studio. The quiet suburb offered affordable housing, close enough to the city for work opportunities. They saw it as the perfect place to start their life together, envisioning lazy Sunday mornings in their backyard and cozy evenings planning their future. Little did they know that their new neighborhood held secrets and temptations that would test the strength of their young love. As they unpacked boxes in their new home, neither Eric nor Zara could have imagined the turmoil that lay ahead or the devastating consequences their choices would have. The annual summer block party was a tradition that dated back decades. Every year on the last Saturday of August, Sycamore Lane would transform into a bustling fairground of sorts. Neighbors would bring out grills, coolers full of drinks, and folding tables laden with potluck dishes. Children would run around with water guns and bubble wands, while adults caught up on neighborhood gossip and sipped cold beers. This year's party held a special significance for the residents of Sycamore Lane. It was the official welcome for the Donovans, the street's newest additions. Isabella Hawthorne, as the unofficial social director of the neighborhood, had taken it upon herself to ensure that Zara and Eric felt welcomed. As the afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the street, Isabella made her way to the Donovans, who were standing somewhat awkwardly at the edge of the gathering. "Isabella, you look lovely," Russell called out as she walked past, her sundress floating around her legs. She flashed him a smile, but her eyes were already fixed on Eric. "Eric and Zara, welcome to the neighborhood," Isabella said warmly, air-kissing Zara's cheeks and letting her hand linger perhaps a moment too long on Eric's arm. "We're so glad you could join us." The conversation flowed easily, lubricated by the fruity sangria Isabella had brought along. Zara found herself drawn into a discussion about local art galleries with some of the other neighbors, while Eric and Isabella drifted towards the Hawthorns' front yard. "You have a beautiful home," Eric commented, his eyes roving over the house. Isabella beamed with pride. "Why, thank you," she replied. "You should see the inside. We recently renovated the master bathroom. Perhaps I could give you a tour sometime. Get you some ideas for your own place?" The flirtatious undertone in Isabella's voice was unmistakable. Eric, slightly taken aback but not displeased, felt a flush creep up his neck. Before he could respond, Russell appeared, clapping a hand on Eric's shoulder. "Hope my wife isn't talking your ear off, son." Russell chuckled. Isabella shot him a look that mixed annoyance and affection. "Actually, she was just offering to show me your renovation," Eric said, his voice slightly strained. As the evening wore on, the two couples found themselves gravitating towards each other. Zara, charmed by Russell's dad jokes and genuine interest in her artwork, found herself relaxing for the first time since moving in. Isabella, meanwhile, hung on Eric's every word as he described his photography projects. By the time the party wound down, seeds had been planted, seeds of attraction, curiosity, and temptation that would soon grow into something none of them could have anticipated. It was a week after the block party that Isabella first broached the subject with Russell. They were in bed, the TV droning in the background, when Isabella turned to her husband with a mischievous glint in her eye. Isabella broached the subject with Russell one night as they lay in bed. Her voice was casual, but there was an undercurrent of excitement as she asked if he had ever considered spicing up their love life. Russell, half asleep, mumbled incoherently at first. Isabella pressed on, clarifying that she meant specifically in the bedroom. This caught Russell's attention and he became suddenly alert. Cautiously, Russell asked what exactly she had in mind. Isabella took a deep breath before suggesting they try swapping partners with another couple. The silence that followed her proposal was deafening. Russell stared at his wife, trying to determine if she was serious. As he realized she was, a mix of emotions played across his face: shock, intrigue, and a hint of arousal. Over the next few days, the Hawthorns had numerous discussions about Isabella's proposition. Russell, initially hesitant, found himself warming to the idea. The thought of being with a younger woman stirred something in him he thought had long since died. It was Isabella who finally suggested the Donovans. They're young, attractive, and new to the area, she reasoned. They might be open to something like this. Approaching the younger couple proved to be a delicate matter. It was at a neighborhood barbecue that Isabella, emboldened by several glasses of wine, pulled Zara aside. The conversation was awkward at first, with Isabella dancing around the subject, but once the proposition was laid out, Zara's reaction surprised her. Instead of outrage or disgust, there was curiosity in the younger woman's eyes. The evening of the swap arrived with a mix of nervous energy and anticipation. The Hawthorns had suggested using their home, citing their finished basement as a perfect, private setting. As Zara and Eric walked up the driveway hand in hand, Zara could feel her heart pounding in her chest. "Are we really doing this?" He squeezed her hand reassuringly, but she could see the apprehension in his eyes as well. Isabella greeted them at the door, her smile a little too bright, her laugh a little too loud. The forced casualness of the situation was palpable as they made small talk over glasses of expensive red wine. Russell busied himself with the stereo, filling the room with soft jazz in an attempt to ease the tension. After what seemed like an eternity of awkward conversation, Isabella finally stood up. "So," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "shall we?" They had agreed beforehand on the pairings, Isabella with Eric, Russell with Zara. As they split off, Zara couldn't help but glance back at Eric, a moment of uncertainty passing between them. But then Eric disappeared down the hallway with Isabella, and Zara found herself alone with Russell. Russell led Zara to the guest bedroom, his hand gentle on the small of her back. Despite his earlier bravado, he felt a wave of nervousness wash over him. It had been years since he'd been with anyone other than Isabella. Zara, sensing his hesitation, took the initiative. She reached up and kissed him softly, then more passionately. Russell responded, his hands exploring her young, firm body with growing confidence. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Isabella was living out the fantasies she'd been harboring since she first laid eyes on Eric. His youthful energy and enthusiasm more than made up for any lack of experience. Isabella felt desired, beautiful, alive in a way she hadn't in years. Eric, for his part, was intoxicated by Isabella's confidence and sensuality. As the encounters reached their climax, a series of emotions washed over each participant. Excitement, pleasure, guilt, and an unexpected emptiness all mingled together in a confusing cocktail. Afterwards, as they all reconvened in the living room, an awkward silence fell over the group. The reality of what they had done seemed to hit them all at once. Zara couldn't meet Eric's eyes, focusing instead on smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her dress. Russell cleared his throat several times, but couldn't seem to find any words. Only Isabella seemed truly at ease, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It was Eric who finally broke the silence. "Well," he said, his attempt at a casual tone falling flat. That was something. The tension broke and nervous laughter filled the room. They made stilted small talk for a few more minutes before the Donovans made their excuses and left. As Zara and Eric walked home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, they were unaware of the seismic shift that had just occurred in their relationships. Back in the Hawthorne house, Isabella hummed to herself as she cleaned up, already thinking about the next time. Russell watched her, a nagging feeling of unease growing in the pit of his stomach. None of them realized that this night was just the beginning, the first step down a path that would lead to obsession, betrayal, and ultimately, tragedy. In the days following the swap, life seemed to return to normal, but beneath the surface, changes were brewing, particularly in Eric Donovan. Eric found himself unable to stop thinking about Isabella. The encounter had awakened something in him, a hunger he'd never experienced before. He began to find excuses to be outside when he knew Isabella would be leaving for work. He'd wave, trying to appear casual, but his eyes would linger on her long after she'd driven away. Zara noticed the change in her husband almost immediately. Eric seemed distracted, often lost in thought. When she tried to initiate intimacy, he was either too tired or not in the mood. Their once passionate lovemaking became infrequent and mechanical. One afternoon, Zara came home early from a client meeting to find Eric's photography workspace in disarray. As she began to tidy up, she noticed something odd. Hidden beneath a stack of prints was a folder filled with photos of Isabella. Some were clearly taken from a distance, capturing Isabella gardening, getting her mail, or walking to her car. Others were more intimate, zoomed-in shots through windows, Isabella in various states of undress. Zara felt her stomach churn. This wasn't just a harmless crush or the after effects of their encounter. This was something much more sinister. Meanwhile, Isabella had begun to notice Eric's increased presence in her daily life. At first, she was flattered by the attention, even reciprocating with flirtatious glances and accidental touches when they'd run into each other. But as the days wore on, Eric's behavior became more erratic and intense. He began sending her messages at all hours, alternating between passionate declarations of love and angry accusations. When she didn't respond quickly enough, Isabella tried to let him down gently, explaining that their encounter was a one-time thing, but Eric refused to accept it. One night, Isabella woke to the sound of something hitting her bedroom window. Peering out, she saw Eric standing in her front yard, a handful of pebbles in his hand. His eyes, wild and unfocused, locked onto hers. "I can't live without you, Isabella," he called out, his voice breaking. "We're meant to be together." Isabella quickly closed the curtains, her heart racing. She woke Russell, who grumbled as he went to confront Eric. By the time Russell made it outside, Eric had disappeared into the night, leaving only a crumpled bouquet of flowers on the front step. As Isabella lay awake that night, she realized with growing horror that her exciting sexual experiment had unleashed something dark and dangerous. She had no idea how right she was, or how tragic the consequences would be. Over the next few weeks, Eric's behavior spiraled further out of control. His obsession with Isabella consumed every aspect of his life. He neglected his photography business, spending hours stalking Isabella's social media accounts and driving by her house. Zara watched helplessly as her husband transformed into someone she barely recognized. Isabella, for her part, vacillated between fear and a perverse excitement. Part of her was terrified of Eric's growing instability, but another part, a part she was ashamed to admit existed, was thrilled by his obsessive attention. It made her feel desirable, powerful in a way she hadn't in years. The situation came to a head one afternoon when Isabella returned home to find Eric sitting in her living room. "How did you get in here?" she gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Eric smiled, a cold, unsettling expression that sent chills down Isabella's spine. "You gave me a key, remember? For watering the plants when you were on vacation." Isabella's mind raced. That had been months ago, before the swap, before everything had gone wrong. She should have asked for it back. Why hadn't she asked for it back? Eric stood, moving towards her with predatory grace. "We need to talk, Isabella," he said, his voice low and intense. "About us, about our future together." Isabella backed away, fumbling for her phone. "There is no us, Eric," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You need to leave." But Eric kept advancing, his eyes wild with a mixture of love and madness. "You don't mean that," he insisted. "I know you feel what I feel. We're destined to be together, Isabella. I won't let anyone come between us." As Eric reached for her, Isabella let out a scream. The sound seemed to snap Eric out of his trance. He blinked, looking around as if seeing the room for the first time. Without another word, he brushed past Isabella and out the front door. Shaking, Isabella collapsed onto the couch. She knew she should call the police, but what would she say? That she'd willingly slept with her young neighbor, and now he was stalking her. The thought of the scandal, of everyone knowing what she'd done, was unbearable. Little did Isabella know, her silence would have devastating consequences. For in his twisted mind, Eric took her failure to report him as a sign of her secret love, and he was determined to eliminate any obstacles standing in their way, no matter the cost. The tension that had been building for weeks finally erupted on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Isabella was alone in her house, Russell having left for a golf game with friends. She was in the kitchen, mindlessly flipping through a magazine when she heard the back door open. Isabella called out with a trembling voice, asking if it was Eric. There was no response, only the sound of footsteps moving through the house. Her heart racing, Isabella grabbed a kitchen knife, holding it out in front of her like a shield. When Eric appeared in the doorway, his eyes were glazed and unfocused, and he reeked of alcohol. He slurred that he had seen Russell drive away, declaring that now they could be together as they were supposed to be. Isabella pleaded with Eric, telling him he needed help and that this wasn't right, but she couldn't finish her sentence. Eric wasn't listening. He lunged forward, trying to grab Isabella. She shrieked and swung the knife wildly, connecting with Eric's arm and drawing blood. The sight of his own blood seemed to enrage Eric further. He roared an insult at her and charged again. In the ensuing struggle, the knife clattered to the floor. Eric's hands found Isabella's throat, squeezing with terrifying strength. Isabella clawed at his face, gasping for air as her vision began to darken around the edges. In desperation, she brought her knee up sharply, connecting with Eric's groin. The blow caused him to double over in pain, releasing his grip on her throat. Isabella scrambled away, her fingers closing around the handle of the fallen knife. As Eric straightened up, his face contorted with rage, Isabella acted on pure instinct. She thrust the knife forward, feeling it sink into Eric's chest. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Eric looked down at the knife protruding from his body, a look of surprise replacing the anger on his face. Then slowly he crumpled to the floor. Isabella stared at Eric's still form, the reality of what she'd done crashing over her. With shaking hands, she reached for her phone and dialed 911. The quiet of the community was shattered by the wail of sirens as police cars and an ambulance converged on the Hawthorne residence. Neighbors poured out onto their front lawns, watching in shock as paramedics rushed into the house, only to emerge shortly after, shaking their heads grimly. Detective Liam Reeves, a veteran of the Portland Police Department, arrived on the scene to find a distraught Isabella Hawthorne being questioned by officers. Her hands and clothes were stained with blood, her eyes wild with shock and fear. As Reeves approached, he overheard snippets of Isabella's statement. She was saying that Eric had attacked her, that she had no choice in expressing shock and disbelief at what she had done. Reeves took charge of the scene, ordering a thorough search of the house and surrounding area, while crime scene technicians combed through the kitchen, photographing the bloody knife and the signs of struggle. Reeves turned his attention to the neighbors. Zara Donovan stood at the edge of the police tape, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. Reeves approached her gently, introducing himself as Detective Reeves and confirming that the victim was her husband. Zara nodded mutely, tears streaming down her face. When Reeves pressed her about when she had last seen Eric, Zara managed to choke out that it had been that morning. She explained that Eric had said he was going for a walk, but her voice trailed off as she struggled to process the situation. Unable to continue, she broke down sobbing. Reeves made a note in his pad before moving on to question other neighbors. As he gathered more information, a story began to emerge of a quiet neighborhood rocked by an unthinkable crime. As the body of Eric Donovan was wheeled out on a gurney, covered by a sheet, Reeves couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this case than a simple home invasion gone wrong. The look in Isabella Hawthorne's eyes, a mixture of relief and guilt, told him that unraveling the truth would be a complex and delicate process. In the days following Eric's death, Detective Reeves dove deep into the lives of both the Hawthornes and the Donovans. What he uncovered was a tangled web of secrets and lies that painted a very different picture from the initial reports of a random break-in. Interviews with neighbors revealed whispers of an illicit affair between Isabella and Eric. Cell phone records showed an overwhelming number of calls and messages from Eric to Isabella in the weeks leading up to the incident, many of which had gone unanswered. But it was the discovery of Eric's photography studio that blew the case wide open. Hidden among his professional equipment, detectives found a camera with a high-powered zoom lens and memory cards filled with hundreds of photos of Isabella, many taken without her knowledge. When confronted with this evidence, Zara broke down. Through tears, she revealed the truth about the partner swap and the subsequent obsession that had gripped her husband. She spoke of Eric's erratic behavior, his neglect of their marriage, and her own fears about his mental state. Isabella, faced with the mounting evidence, finally confessed to the full story. She admitted to the affair and the stalking, but maintained that the final confrontation had been self-defense. Russell, devastated by his wife's infidelity, nonetheless stood by her side throughout the ordeal. As Reeves pieced together the events that led to that fatal Sunday afternoon, he was struck by the tragedy of it all. What had begun as a misguided attempt to spice up a stagnant marriage had spiraled into an obsession that cost a young man his life and forever changed the lives of all involved. The case, once thought to be a straightforward home invasion, was now revealed to be a complex tale of desire, betrayal, and deadly obsession. The prosecution painted Isabella as a bored housewife who initiated an affair with a younger man, then killed him to keep her indiscretion secret. They emphasized the premeditated nature of her actions, pointing to the convenient absence of her husband on the day of the killing. The defense, led by high-profile attorney Simone Jeffries, argued passionately that Isabella was a victim of stalking and harassment who acted in self-defense. They presented evidence of Eric's obsessive behavior and called expert witnesses to testify about the psychological impact of stalking on victims. Zara's testimony proved to be a turning point in the trial. Her emotional account of Eric's descent into obsession and her own fear for Isabella's safety swayed many jurors. "She's not the monster they're making her out to be," Zara said through tears. "Eric, he wasn't himself at the end. What happened is a tragedy, but Isabella was as much a victim as anyone." In his closing arguments, the prosecutor urged the jury not to be swayed by emotion. "The facts are clear," he insisted. "Mrs. Hawthorne made a series of choices that led to this tragic outcome. She must be held accountable." Simone Jeffries, in her rebuttal, appealed to the jury's sense of empathy. "Put yourself in Isabella's shoes," she implored. Terrified, alone, confronted by a man who had been stalking her for weeks, she did what anyone would do. She fought for her life. As the jury filed out to begin deliberations, the courtroom buzzed with speculation. The fate of Isabella Hawthorne and the final judgment on this suburban tragedy now rested in their hands. Isabella Hawthorne was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 3. As Isabella was led away from the courtroom, the impact of the tragedy on all involved was palpable. Russell Hawthorne, his face haggard from the stress of the trial, watched his wife disappear through the courtroom doors. Despite the revelations of her infidelity, he had stood by her throughout the ordeal. Now he faced the prospect of years alone, grappling with the consequences of their ill-fated experiment. Sarah Donovan, widowed and alone, retreated from public life. The trauma of losing Eric and the public exposure of their private lives left deep scars. She threw herself into her art, producing a series of haunting paintings that would later be hailed as a powerful exploration of grief and betrayal. The residents struggled to come to terms with the events that had shattered their peaceful community. The Hawthorne and Donovan houses stood empty, constant reminders of the tragedy that had unfolded. Some neighbors moved away, unable to bear the memories. Those who stayed found their trust in one another irrevocably altered. In the quiet suburb of Millbrook, nestled just outside the bustling city of Hartford, Connecticut, a heinous crime shattered the illusion of peaceful suburban life. On a crisp autumn morning in September 2018, the body of 17-year-old Sarah Thompson was discovered in the woods behind her family's home. The gruesome scene sent shockwaves through the community, leaving residents locked behind their doors and whispering about the killer who walked among them. Detective Michael Carter, a seasoned investigator with the Hartford Police Department, was called to lead the case. With his sharp intuition and unwavering dedication, Carter delved into the intricate web of lies and deceit surrounding Sarah's murder. Little did he know that this case would challenge his perceptions and force him to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. As the investigation unfolded, suspicion initially fell on Sarah's stepmother, Amanda Wilson. The troubled relationship between the two had been no secret to their neighbors, and Amanda's apparent jealousy of her stepdaughter seemed to provide a motive. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward case lay a twisted tale of betrayal, secrets, and fatal consequences. At the center of this tragedy stood Robert Wilson, Sarah's stepfather. A respected businessman and pillar of the community, Robert appeared to be the grieving father figure, supporting his wife through their shared loss. But as Detective Carter would soon discover, Robert's carefully constructed facade concealed a web of lies that would ultimately lead to his downfall. This is the story of a murder that tore apart a family, challenged a detective's instincts and revealed the devastating consequences of unchecked desire and betrayal. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators are hiding in plain sight, wearing the mask of normalcy in our very own neighborhoods. Sarah Thompson was a vibrant and promising young woman whose life was cut tragically short just weeks before her 18th birthday. Born to single mother Amanda Thompson in 2001, Sarah grew up as a bright and curious child, always eager to learn and explore the world around her. From an early age, Sarah showed a passion for art and literature. Her teachers often praised her creativity and insightful essays, marking her as a student with great potential. Sarah's artwork adorned the walls of her high school, and she had recently begun to explore photography, capturing the beauty of nature in the woods behind her home, the same woods that would ultimately become the site of her untimely death. Despite her academic and artistic achievements, Sarah's home life was far from perfect. When she was 12, her mother married Robert Wilson, a successful local businessman. While Sarah initially welcomed the stability Robert brought to their lives, the relationship between stepdaughter and stepfather grew increasingly strained as Sarah entered her teenage years. Friends and classmates described Sarah as kind-hearted, but fiercely independent. She had a small, tight-knit group of friends and was known for standing up against bullying in school. Her best friend, Emily Chen, recalled Sarah's dream of studying journalism at NYU, aspiring to become an investigative reporter and uncover truths hidden beneath the surface. Sarah's relationship with her mother, Amanda, had always been complex. As an only child, Sarah had been the center of Amanda's world for years. However, the arrival of Robert in their lives created a shift in dynamics. Sarah often felt that her mother prioritized her new marriage over their mother-daughter bond, leading to frequent arguments and emotional distance. In the months leading up to her death, those close to Sarah noticed a change in her demeanor. She became more withdrawn, spending increased time alone in her room or wandering in the woods with her camera. Her art took on darker themes, and her usually meticulous schoolwork began to slip. Emily remembered Sarah seeming distracted and worried, but when pressed, Sarah would brush off concerns with a forced smile and a change of subject. What no one knew at the time was that Sarah had stumbled upon a secret that would prove fatal. In her quest for truth and her natural curiosity, she had uncovered something that someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. Sarah Thompson's young life, full of promise and potential, was snuffed out just as she stood on the threshold of adulthood, leaving behind a community in mourning and a mystery that would shake Millbrook to its core. Robert Wilson, age 45 at the time of Sarah's murder, presented himself as the epitome of suburban success. A charismatic and well-respected financial advisor, Robert had built a thriving practice in Hartford, managing the wealth of some of the city's most affluent residents. His polished appearance and confident demeanor made him a natural leader in the community, serving on the local Chamber of Commerce and coaching youth soccer. Born and raised in a working-class family in Boston, Robert had clawed his way up the social ladder through a combination of charm, intelligence, and ruthless ambition. He met Amanda Thompson at a charity gala in 2012, and their whirlwind romance culminated in marriage just 8 months later. To the outside world, Robert appeared to be the perfect husband and stepfather, providing stability and financial security to Amanda and Sarah. However, beneath the veneer of success and respectability, Robert harbored dark secrets and unfulfilled desires. His marriage to Amanda had quickly lost its luster, and he found himself drawn to the excitement of an illicit affair. For the past year, Robert had been involved in a passionate relationship with Elena Gonzalez, the wife of his next-door neighbor and close friend David. Robert's affair with Elena was more than just a physical attraction. He felt truly alive in her presence, experiencing a connection he believed he had never shared with Amanda. The two lovers would meet in secret, stealing moments of passion while their spouses were at work or running errands. Robert became expert at lying and manipulating those around him to maintain his double life. As Sarah entered her late teens, Robert found himself increasingly uncomfortable in her presence. Her perceptive nature and keen eye for detail made him paranoid that she might uncover his infidelity. He began to avoid spending time alone with his stepdaughter, making excuses to miss family dinners and events. Friends and colleagues described Robert as charming and generous, always ready with a joke or a helping hand. David Gonzalez, unaware of Robert's betrayal, often praised him as the best neighbor and friend a man could ask for. Robert's clients trusted him implicitly, drawn in by his confident assurances and impressive track record. Yet those who knew Robert best sensed an underlying current of discontent. His assistant at the financial firm noted his increased irritability and distraction in the months leading up to Sarah's death. Robert's longtime friend from college, Mark Stevens, observed that Robert seemed to be living on edge, as if constantly looking over his shoulder. Little did anyone suspect that behind Robert Wilson's carefully crafted image lay a man capable of unspeakable acts, driven by desperation to protect his secrets and preserve his way of life at any cost. The grisly discovery was made on the morning of September 15, 2018, by a jogger on his usual trail through the woods behind the Wilson residence. The body of Sarah Thompson lay partially concealed beneath a pile of leaves and branches, a crude attempt at concealment that did little to hide the horrific nature of the crime. Detective Michael Carter arrived on the scene within the hour, his experienced eye taking in every detail. Sarah's body showed signs of a violent struggle. Bruises marred her arms and face, and defensive wounds on her hands indicated she had fought desperately for her life. The cause of death was immediately apparent: a jagged wound across her throat, likely inflicted with a serrated blade. As the forensics team combed the area for evidence, Carter noted several key details. Sarah's camera, which friends claimed she always carried on her woodland excursions, was missing. Drag marks and disturbed vegetation suggested the body had been moved from the initial site of the attack, possibly in an attempt to hide it from immediate discovery. Perhaps most tellingly, there were no signs of sexual assault, leading Carter to suspect that the motive for the murder was personal rather than opportunistic. The brutality of the attack pointed to a crime of passion. Someone who knew Sarah and had been driven to a moment of uncontrollable rage. As news of the murder spread, the once peaceful community of Millbrook descended into a state of fear and suspicion. Neighbors who had previously left their doors unlocked now double-checked their security systems. Parents kept their children indoors, and the woods that had once been a place of recreation became a no-go zone, cordoned off with yellow police tape. Detective Michael Carter, a 20-year veteran of the Hartford Police Department, took charge of the investigation with a grim determination. Known for his meticulous approach and uncanny ability to see connections others missed, Carter had solved some of the department's most challenging cases. As he stood in the Wilsons' living room, surveying the family photos on the mantel, he knew this case would test him like never before. The first 48 hours of the investigation were a whirlwind of activity. Carter and his team conducted initial interviews with family members, friends, and neighbors. Sarah's school records were examined, her social media account scrutinized, and her movements in the days leading up to her death were painstakingly reconstructed. Robert Wilson, appearing shell-shocked, provided a detailed account of his whereabouts on the night of the murder. He claimed to have been working late at his office, a fact corroborated by security footage and his assistant's testimony. Amanda Wilson, still visibly distraught, struggled to maintain composure during her interview. She admitted to having argued with Sarah the afternoon before her disappearance, but insisted it was just typical mother-daughter friction. As Carter delved deeper, a picture began to emerge of a household fraught with tension. Neighbors spoke of frequent arguments between Sarah and her mother, their raised voices often carrying across manicured lawns. Sarah's best friend, Emily Chen, revealed that Sarah had been increasingly unhappy at home, feeling trapped and misunderstood. The forensics team's initial findings provided more questions than answers. Trace evidence found on Sarah's clothing didn't match samples taken from Robert or Amanda. The murder weapon, likely a hunting knife or similar serrated blade, was nowhere to be found despite an extensive search of the Wilson property and surrounding areas. A breakthrough came when Carter interviewed Elena Gonzalez, the Wilsons' next-door neighbor. Elena, visibly nervous during the interview, mentioned that she had seen Sarah arguing with Amanda in the driveway the day before her disappearance. More intriguingly, Elena let slip that Amanda had always seemed jealous of her daughter's youth and beauty. This information, combined with the tumultuous home environment and Amanda's shaky alibi for the night of the murder, led Carter to focus his attention on Sarah's mother. He theorized that years of resentment had finally boiled over, resulting in a confrontation that turned deadly. As the investigation entered its second week, Carter felt confident they were on the right track. He obtained a warrant to search Amanda's personal belongings and communications, hoping to find the crucial piece of evidence that would break the case wide open. However, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of Carter's mind. Something about Robert Wilson's calm demeanor and perfect alibi struck him as too neat, too convenient. Little did Carter know that his instincts were leading him toward a truth far more sinister than he could have imagined. As the investigation progressed, all signs seemed to point toward Amanda Wilson as the prime suspect of her daughter's murder. Detective Carter, driven by the evidence at hand, began to build a case against the 42-year-old homemaker with a troubled past. Carter's team uncovered a series of heated text exchanges between Amanda and Sarah in the weeks leading up to the murder. In one particularly vicious argument, Amanda accused Sarah of trying to sabotage her marriage, while Sarah fired back, calling her mother a pathetic, jealous old woman. These digital breadcrumbs seemed to support the theory of a family dynamic that had reached a breaking point. Further fueling suspicion was Amanda's behavior in the aftermath of Sarah's death. While initially distraught, she quickly became defensive and evasive during questioning. Her alibi for the night of the murder was weak. She claimed to have been home alone, watching television with no one to corroborate her story. A search of the Wilson home uncovered a journal hidden in Amanda's bedside table. Entries detailed her growing resentment towards Sarah, lamenting the girl's beauty and the attention she received from Robert. One disturbing passage read, "Sometimes I wish she would just disappear. Our lives would be so much better without her constant presence, her judging eyes." The case against Amanda seemed to strengthen when a neighbor reported seeing her return home in the early hours of the morning on the day Sarah's body was discovered. Amanda had no explanation for this late-night excursion, claiming she must have been sleepwalking, a condition she had never mentioned before. As circumstantial evidence mounted, Carter felt increasing pressure from his superiors and the media to make an arrest. The community, gripped by fear, demanded justice for Sarah. Amanda Wilson, once a sympathetic figure, became the target of public hatred and suspicion. Carter, despite his growing certainty of Amanda's guilt, couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Something about her desperation and fear during interrogations didn't align with the calculated killer he believed had committed this crime. Nevertheless, with the evidence at hand, he prepared to make an arrest. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Sarah's body was found, Amanda Wilson was taken into custody. As she was led from her home in handcuffs, she protested her innocence, her cries echoing through the stunned neighborhood. Robert Wilson watched from the doorway, his face an unreadable mask as his wife was placed in the back of a police cruiser. Little did Carter know that in his pursuit of justice, he had fallen for a brilliantly orchestrated misdirection, leaving the true killer free to cover his tracks. The case against Amanda Wilson seemed airtight, but Detective Michael Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, that finally set him on the path to the truth. While reviewing security footage from businesses near the Wilson home, Carter noticed Robert's car leaving his office parking lot much earlier than he had claimed on the night of the murder. Intrigued by this discrepancy, Carter decided to dig deeper into Robert Wilson's life. He re-interviewed Robert's colleagues and clients, paying closer attention to the man's movements and relationships. It was during a conversation with Robert's assistant that Carter stumbled upon a crucial piece of information. Robert had been making frequent, unexplained trips to a coffee shop across town, always during his lunch break. Surveillance of the coffee shop revealed a startling discovery. Robert was meeting regularly with Elena Gonzalez, his neighbor's wife. The two displayed an intimacy that went far beyond friendly neighborly interactions. Carter had uncovered Robert's secret affair. With this new information, Carter approached Elena for another interview. Confronted with evidence of the affair, Elena broke down, revealing the extent of her relationship with Robert. They had been involved for over a year, stealing moments together whenever they could. Elena, racked with guilt, admitted that she had lied in her previous statement to protect Robert. The affair cast Robert's alibi for the night of the murder in a new light. Elena confirmed that they had indeed met that evening, contradicting Robert's claim of working late. This revelation shattered the carefully constructed timeline Robert had provided. As Carter delved further into the relationship between Robert and Elena, he uncovered a web of lies and secret rendezvous. Bank records showed Robert had recently inquired about transferring large sums of money offshore. Email exchanges hinted at plans for a new life together, away from their spouses and responsibilities. The detective now faced a troubling question. Could Robert Wilson the grieving stepfather actually be Sarah's killer? The motive was unclear, but the cracks in Robert's perfect facade were beginning to show. Carter realized he had been so focused on Amanda that he had nearly missed the real story unfolding right before his eyes. The pivotal moment in the investigation came from an unexpected source. Sarah's best friend, Emily Chen, approached Detective Carter with a small leather-bound book, Sarah's personal diary. Emily, racked with guilt, admitted she had initially withheld the diary, fearing it might tarnish Sarah's memory. But as suspicion fell on Amanda, Emily realized the truth was more important than protecting her friend's secrets. Carter spent a sleepless night poring over Sarah's private thoughts. The diary painted a vivid picture of a young woman grappling with a terrible discovery. In entries dating back several months, Sarah wrote of her growing suspicion that her stepfather was having an affair. She described catching glimpses of furtive text messages, overhearing hushed phone calls, and noticing Robert's increasingly erratic behavior. The most damning entry came just 3 days before Sarah's murder. In shaky handwriting, she recounted following Robert one evening and witnessing him in an intimate embrace with Elena Gonzalez. Sarah wrote of her disgust and betrayal, expressing uncertainty about whether to confront Robert or tell her mother. This revelation provided the missing piece of the puzzle. Sarah had discovered Robert's affair, presenting a clear motive for murder. Robert, a man who had built his life on carefully maintaining appearances, faced the threat of losing everything: his marriage, his reputation, and his financial stability. Armed with this new information, Carter revisited the forensic evidence. He ordered a more thorough examination of Sarah's clothing, specifically searching for trace evidence that might have been overlooked. The results were telling. Fibers found on Sarah's jacket matched those from a rare wool blend used in Robert's expensive suits. Furthermore, a re-examination of Sarah's phone records showed a series of calls to Robert's office number on the day of her disappearance. The calls had been brief, suggesting Sarah might have been trying to confront her stepfather or arrange a meeting. Carter also discovered that Robert had purchased a hunting knife from a local sporting goods store just a week before the murder. The knife, conspicuously missing from the Wilson home, matched the type of weapon believed to have been used in the crime. As the pieces fell into place, Carter realized the extent of Robert's deception. He had not only manipulated his family and community, but had also skillfully misdirected the entire investigation towards Amanda. The detective felt a mix of admiration for Robert's cunning and disgust at his cold-blooded actions. With mounting evidence pointing to Robert Wilson as the killer, Carter knew he needed to move quickly. The man who had once been viewed as a pillar of the community was now revealed to be a calculating murderer, willing to sacrifice his stepdaughter to protect his secrets. Detective Carter decided to confront Robert Wilson at his office, away from the prying eyes of neighbors and the media that had been camped outside the Wilson home. As Carter and his partner entered the plush confines of Robert's financial advisory firm, they found him in the middle of a client meeting, the picture of professional composure. In a voice barely above a whisper, Robert began to talk. He spoke of Sarah confronting him in the woods, threatening to expose his affair to Amanda and Elena's husband. He described the panic that overtook him, the fear of losing everything he had worked for. With tears streaming down his face, Robert recounted how he had lashed out in desperation, silencing Sarah permanently. The confession poured out of him, a torrent of guilt and self-loathing. Robert described how he had meticulously planned to frame Amanda, playing on the known tensions between stepmother and stepdaughter. As Carter placed him under arrest, Robert's only words were a broken plea: "Don't tell Elena. Please don't let her know what I've done." The once proud man was led out of his office in handcuffs, his world collapsing around him as the truth of his actions finally came to light. After a 2-week trial and mere hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, including first-degree murder. The judge, citing the brutal nature of the crime and Robert's calculated attempts to deceive investigators, sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice had been served. But for those whose lives had been shattered by Robert's actions, the wounds would take far longer to heal. In the end, the case of Robert Wilson stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the enduring power of a young woman's voice, even when silenced, to ultimately reveal the truth.